start with the recent Gallup poll about the legalization of cannabis. That poll reports 68% of Americans think cannabis should be legalized at the federal level. That's the highest total ever, up from 63% that the Pew Research Group gathered in the fall of 2019. Now, that healthy growth also reflects the fact that there were 6 ballot questions about cannabis on 5 different states on election day, and all 6 questions passed. That brings the total of legal adult use of cannabis states up to 15, and another 36 states now have medicinal programs. Now, one of the biggest winners on the ballot was New Jersey, but not all is hunky-dory in the Garden State, now is it? In fact, as soon as the legislature gets involved, what do you think happens? Money grab time. Yes, I will add money grab time by the white capitalists who are trying to gain a foothold on a new market. This really pissed the social equity community off. Pastor Charles Boyer is the director of the Salvation and Social Justice Group, and his quote pretty much says it all. Charles said, "The bill that was introduced was egregious, audacious, and it was ludicrous. It was a white man money grab." So now the battle begins by each state that has been given the green light by their voters to start adult use sales of cannabis. Now, everyone on the ballot questions has a clause that basically says those who have been most impacted by the failed war on drugs should get access to opportunities for licenses and have records expunged for possession crimes, which always have targeted the Black and brown communities. Remember, it took Massachusetts 2 years after passing the ballot question to open their first dispensary, and it took Maine 4 years. So while a cannabis question on the ballot drives voters to the ballot box, the work begins after the fact, and legislators are clueless when it comes to coming up with fair regulations. Even now in Massachusetts, where the Cannabis Control Commission has finally given an opportunity for social equity applicants to get their first crack at those valuable delivery licenses, well, that's still an ongoing controversy. Turning to the dysfunctional federal government right now, the House of Representatives is still moving towards voting on the MORE Act in December. That bill stands for Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. It would decriminalize cannabis by taking it off the Controlled Substances Act, and it would also expunge convictions of nonviolent cannabis offenses. Now, many consider the MORE Act just the first step towards full legalization of cannabis in the US. Of course, even if the MORE Act does go to a vote in the full House, there is still that issue of the Republican-controlled Senate to deal with. And they can't even agree on a second COVID relief bill. In the meantime, another country just south of the US, Mexico, is moving towards legalization rather quickly, with their version of the Senate passing it over the weekend. Another country that's moving towards legalization is Israel. Yes, the promised land has always been at the forefront of science and research and accepts its medicinal strengths. But now their Minister of Justice, Avi Nissenkorn, sees legalization as inevitable over the next 9 months. And I say, Mazel Tov. And that's the news headlines for this month. For the Emerald Media Group, I'm Pro Cannabis Media's Jimmy Young reporting. Now back to Jill and Christina for the webinar.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Thank you so much, Jill. I do so love hearing the news from Pro Cannabis Media. Thank you all for joining us today for this panel that discusses social equity. This is a very important topic in the cannabis industry that is frankly just not discussed enough. How can we do better, and how can we give back to the community and those that have been disproportionately marginalized by the war on drugs? So from my home to your home, I want to say thank you for joining us today. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator, Mary Carrion. She is an award-winning journalist from Southern California, and she's the associate editor at Mary Jane. Formerly, she's the news editor at High Times. Mary's drawn to stories about cannabis and the environment, social equity, veterans, the opioid epidemic, and the history of cannabis in California. And she's also discussing on the rise of psychedelics and plant medicine in the 21st century. You can find her byline in Forbes, Kitchen Toke, OC Weekly, LA Weekly, Sensi Magazine, and more. We are so thrilled to have Mary with us today. And without further ado, Mary, please take the stage.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in and coming to listen about one of the most important topics in cannabis. Thank you for having me, Emerald Magazine. This is awesome. And I am thrilled that you guys are having a platform for this topic and for a number of other topics in the cannabis space. Even though it's something that we all are kind of familiar with, a lot of people still have to learn about things, whether that's sex and cannabis, whether that's social equity, social justice, and many other very important topics within the space. So thank you guys for providing a platform for that. As I was just introduced, my name is Mary Carrion, and I am the associate editor at Mary Jane, that is Snoop Dogg's media company. And like I've said, I am so honored to be here. Social equity in cannabis is already an extremely hot topic, but I truly believe it's about to become the topic in cannabis heading into 2021. And I don't think that is going to change. I think it's going to stay that way until we see change and a major overhaul in the cannabis industry, which ideally, in my opinion, would start with regulations, making the legal space all around more accessible to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. But more on that in a sec. Let me introduce to you our incredibly knowledgeable panelists today. And yeah, so that we can just dive right in. Let's start with Marie Momarquet.
Hello, thank you everyone. Thank you for having me, Emerald Magazine. Thank you, Mary. My name is Marie Momarquet. I've been involved with cannabis for a little under 15 years now. Originally, I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I moved to California to stay out of trouble and get involved with cannabis entrepreneurship. And I started a couple companies with my brother. First one legally in 2015 was a delivery company based in the Bay Area in Redwood City. And then we expanded into LA with a delivery service. We now opened up a farm in 2016 in Salinas that's mixed light, 50,000 square feet. And we have a consulting distribution company called Legacy Coterie that deals with sales and service and different distribution pieces. And I spend a lot of my time having conversations like today and working with social equity and working with Miss Ann, who I love. And yeah, I'm super excited to be on the show and really excited to have these conversations like Mary was saying.
Yeah, it's awesome that we're here and we're able to have these conversations. So thank you for extending your expertise on this topic for everybody here. Angela, it's great to see you. Please tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. Yeah, so my name is Angela White, and I am the Equity for Industry Program Manager at Success Centers, and we are located in San Francisco, California. And Success Centers works with the marginalized community and placing them in job placing, arts, and now cannabis. Those are some of the different industries that we work with, and coming up near to put together a job program for people to get hired into the cannabis industry. And so I've been doing this work with people getting hired, and then the equity program came about, and people wanted to find out how to start a business. And so we started doing workshops, teaching them the nuances about the industry. And folks like Marie Momarquet and Jessica Strange now on my team, and other industry professionals work with, make sure that equity gets what they need.
Wonderful. Success Centers is such a wonderful, just a nonprofit, and we need more of that in the space. So you guys are ultimately kind of pioneering in this space in a lot of ways. So thank you for doing that, and thanks for being a role model to other people who want to do what you guys do. Adolph Ward.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for being here.
Great to be here. Good evening to everyone watching. My name is Adolph Ward. I am first and foremost a delivery operator. I've operated a delivery service for a little more than 3.5 years now. We are now called Zip Delivery. We were operational in Sacramento and in the Bay Area, but at the moment we're just focused on the Bay Area. coincidentally, I was actually lucky enough to have participated in the crafting of the nation's first social equity program, which was here in Oakland. And so I was formerly the co-chair of Oak Deck, which worked kind of closely with a lot of other grassroots organizations in the city of Oakland to craft this program. I've also done a little consulting work for other cities with social equity programs or looking at them. And then I also consult for social equity operators. To date, I've helped obtain about 28 social equity licenses throughout the state. And so we're just pushing forward to continue the conversation to see a more diverse workforce and ownership in this space that was really built on the back of compassion, but it hasn't felt very compassionate lately. So again, I'm honored to be on a panel with such like-minded folks who have actually did a lot of the work that was necessary, and I think the subject of the panel, which is social equity, which is obviously spreading throughout the country, is the first step to actually obtaining what we're all looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're lucky. We are talking about such an incredible topic at such a heated moment in history. And, I think that that's going to carry over to 2021 and into the future, which is so important because obviously it hasn't been talked about enough. And here we are talking about it at such a pivotal moment. And I think that now ultimately, people are waking up and people want there to be change. So it's really exciting. And yeah, thank you, panelists, for being here and sharing your knowledge. This is going to be a great conversation and I'm looking forward to it. Should we jump right in? Yeah, I will take that as a yes. So let me see. Yeah, okay. So what are the current challenges social equity applicants are facing right now? Is there anything actionable people like me or those watching can do to help?
Can I speak?
Yes, please.
So here in San Francisco, and I'm sure this is going on in other parts of the country as cannabis becomes legal, I think one of the first things is people should make sure that equity is in the forefront, the equity community is in the forefront of legalization, meaning that there not be a dispensary or any other cannabis business without including the marginalized community as such. I mean, after all, we're over incarcerated. These talking points that folks are using for social justice affect people mostly from my community, which is the Black community. And so, while people are out marching because of the George Floyd situation that happened, George Floyd, like me, is one of those people that look, just by the judicial system. So yes, we want to make sure that, while you're marching, make sure that people from the Black and Brown being able to be a part of this industry.
Yeah, that is very important. That is so, so important. Is there anything else that you guys think that businesses and people like me and people watching can do to help facilitate a more equitable workplace?
Make sure that you're hiring folks from the community, making sure that you're bringing folks in to make decisions when you're that sit at the table with you, not just look around and have people that look like that are non-people of color, I would say, and that word is kind of hard for me to use, but Black people and people of color. Make sure that you are including that demographic in your decision making, because if you're sitting around the table and it's all full of white men, white women, even that, because they don't really understand what has happened to our communities on a total level. Not to say that they don't, but have people in that have been in this arena that can really tell you what you need to do. And then the other thing I would say is funding. Funding for equity community because of the wealth disparities. Step up, help fund some stuff, and not be predatory when you're funding.
Wow, I think that's incredibly important. My God, I think, I imagine that funding is probably an issue that's happening within the equity space right now. Do you find that to be true?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would say not only funding, but Adolf could speak to this too, but you're looking at programs that are being created years after, corporatized, highly capitalized cannabis has already gotten started. So 2018, January 1, everyone's still running to acquire permits. Meanwhile, highly capitalized, globalized entities have come into our space, and we're, the minority space, minority not only being minority, but not being capitalized, we're in need of money. We can't come from marginalized communities and be very rich, or we wouldn't be a marginalized community. So there's an obvious need that we have to partner with good actors, but essentially a lot of people have been pushed to partnering with predatory interests because, of course, whose interests are we looking out for? Those that have the money, not necessarily the equity operator or the equity business owner. So like Ms. Ange said, not only funding, but funding first. If a city is rolling out not equity, but any city is rolling out any cannabis permits, there, number one, needs to be an equity program, but it has to roll out at the same point that the city rolls out all of their corporatized cannabis initiatives as well. Because if you look at, equity, if you give us all some money eventually, but if me and Adolf and Miss Ange have to start 3 years behind everyone else, that's not necessarily a positive for us.
No, yeah, absolutely. There's no way that puts you guys automatically behind everybody else, which how is actually that equity? How is that equity? How's that fair?
And to kind of build on what Marie said, first of all, I completely agree with her. And another caveat is that by equity applicants or the under resourced community being set, a little further back from the starting line, we didn't have the opportunity to fail like the other operators did. The fact of the matter was in California, there was at least a 6-month period of time that the regulations were very lax. And so it was kind of the opportunity for you to get your sea legs, so to speak. And so the marginalized community who didn't possess the resources or the know-how to actually enter the industry didn't have the opportunity to fail like everyone else and to get stabilized. That has done one of the biggest injustices that we've seen in this industry, specifically for cities that have social equity programs that have been very sluggish to actually roll them out and license. Cities like Sacramento, cities like Los Angeles, cities like San Francisco, they didn't do as much justice to those applicants because they didn't have the opportunity to get the preferential licensing that we were promised.
Wow, there's so much there. There's just so much there that I feel like isn't being covered and really isn't being talked about. So I appreciate you bringing these perspectives out here because I don't think everybody knows this. I'm pretty sure nobody knows this. So except for, the people involved.
So not one penny has gone to an equity applicant to this day.
That's
and another thing that I'd also like to add, I think a lot of these jurisdictions didn't take a lot of consideration into the infrastructure necessary to operate. In many cases, these individuals that are coming from disenfranchised communities, they have no business acumen, unfortunately. And so the fact of the matter is that support systems like what Angela and those good folks are doing over at Equity for Industry and other types of service providers that can actually give the insight someone needs to actually successfully run a business is lacking. And so ultimately, it goes to the old saying, I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, but feed a guy, one day and he doesn't go hungry tonight. Teach him how to fish, he doesn't go hungry a lifetime. And so ultimately, there's not enough fishermen teaching how to fish. So to really circle back to the initial question, I think it's twofold. What the average person could do to support an equity business, shop with us, patronize us. If you know it's an equity brand, buy it. If you know it's an equity retailer, shop with them. There's nothing wrong with that. What the industry itself can do is not only diversify its workforce and upper and middle management, but conduct business with people because they are good at what they do and they provide a good product or service. Everyone I think a lot of people fail to realize that cannabis is really a more symbiotic industry. And without the other players in the supply chain, you're kind of on an island by yourself. So conduct business with people of color, conduct business with LGBT-owned companies, conduct business with Black-owned companies, conduct business with Latino-owned company. Every company that in the internal infrastructure doesn't have to look one way. That's not representative of the community you service.
I agree. Go ahead off.
Yeah.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
Yeah, wow. That's absolutely true. I think that spending, like where you spend your dollars these days is more important than ever. You know, who are you actually supporting? Who do you want to support? And at this point, especially in cannabis, we all should be trying to support, you know, Black and brown business, entrepreneurs doing their thing in the space. You know, in my opinion, we need you guys. We need you guys to make this space more of a reflection of who actually uses cannabis and who has always used cannabis. And right now it is not that. So
I can chime in here for a second. It's Jill. We had a question pop up that I wanted to throw out from the audience. Has anyone mentioned a lack of state licensing fee waivers for equity applicants at the state level? Should I repeat it?
Well, here in California, we're in a unique situation. Our state is actually taking social equity a lot more serious than other states. And so while I don't have the exact figures in front of me, if I'm not mistaken, the state of California has already allocated and distributed, I think, $10 million to, I believe it's 6 jurisdictions with social equity programs. And I believe there's more to potentially come in 2021. So there hasn't actually been fee waivers, but they've actually committed funds to actually offset those.
Right here in San Francisco, I think they just released the money for equity applicants, but it's a reimbursement. So you have to be up and running in order to get this funding. So there's nothing for the folks that are trying to get into the pipeline, which is kind of sad to me. But for folks that have fought their way through and got their businesses up and running, if they produce receipts, they can get funding that way. And has a loan program. I think that is pretty awesome for them to do that. And so there's no, what do you call it? When everyone's doing different things for equity. And I think there's no standardization. That's what I'm trying to say. Standardization when it comes to what's being done. Everyone's putting together their own plans. But yeah, San Francisco is doing a reimbursement funding. That's in the works, I should say.
Yeah, and something just to add to that, sole proprietors get a higher percentage than the split, like the almost half and half, 51-49 splits. And just to speak on how hard it is to be a sole proprietor in the city of San Francisco, every single person has a split except one person, Reese Benton. So
right, my hero.
One of those crazy scenarios where like, you don't have to try hard to see the data. You look and see, oh, everyone out here had to partner with someone that was highly capitalized. And this is going to be the creation of what that motivation looks like from that corporation that's controlling the board, that's controlling the funding, that's controlling the taxes. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know a lot of investors that would be like, I will give you 50% of a company for sweat equity. You know, I will fund it. I will give you control, even though it's my money. And your sweat equity is going to equal mine. Like we created a facade when we put together this business structure of how we go out and find partnerships. So all of those things are an integral piece of every little thing going on out here. And then, you know, the funding coming in at some point when you get reimbursed from things you've already paid for. To answer like that question, no. You might get some city fees waived in San Francisco specifically, but you still owe your state, you still owe your annual, you still have to pay every single little professional service that you would have to, anything that goes through the building department, any architecture drawings, anything that you need, you still pay for.
Interesting enough, we're a little unique in Oakland. So a little town pride I'm going to give here. While we got a lot wrong in the program, being the first afforded us a lot of luxuries. And so in our program, Ordinance 5.80 and 5.81, it was initially written that a portion of the non-equity applicant license fees would be allocated for social equity. And so what we did in Oakland was we writ into the ordinance a way to pay for the program. And so what the city did was that it's given those funds out. I think it initially raised, 1.6 or 1.9 million. It initially gave those funds out to social equity applicants as a no interest loan. I think it was initially capped at, just like Marie said, if an equity applicant maintained 100% of the business, they were eligible for a $100,000 loan. I think that's jumped up to 225 now. But coincidentally, what they've done is, since the state started allocating funds, the city of Oakland has also given out $50,000 grants that are you don't have to pay back. They can be used for any aspect of operations. They've just rolled out a new $50,000 workforce development grant, which is literally just to find train and retain employees. We've also opened, or we're in the process of opening, the country's 2 first S-type kitchens, which are all social equity based, which I was lucky enough to have been selected as one of the applicants as well. And the city of Oakland is paying for the rent for that for a year. And then the city of Oakland is also giving another grant. I think it's $500,000. They're releasing an RFP sometime soon for a social equity property to be purchased. And so that's one of the things that we kind of got, and all city fees are waived in Oakland, all inspection fees, all city licensing fees, all everything. So that's one aspect we did get right. We funded it, even though the equity applicants are still undercapitalized. We funded at least part of it from the beginning. And that's been what's been such a disappointment from the other big cities with programs, that they've had shortcomings in funding the programs when the language existed. They just needed to copy it.
So just to give everybody kind of an understanding of how much it actually costs to kind of get your business up and running and off the ground, and that whole process, the licensure process, the opening process, all of everything to be compliant, how much money is a cannabis business typically looking at? And do you mind kind of giving us an example of just how difficult that is?
It depends on what type of business, of course. Let's say you want to open up a storefront, like in San Francisco, that's where we gave a lot of equity priority. You're in the most expensive or the second most expensive city in America. Even if you were in LA, even if you were in Oakland, very expensive cities to get prime real estate. So securing the property, your rent might be $5,000, it might be $10,000, it might be more, depending upon how prime your real estate is, how much real estate you need. If you're growing, of course, you need a lot of real estate. If it's just retail, then you need a small amount of real estate, how much runway you want for all the different things in your pro forma, your operating costs, your personnel, your product. Are you going to pay? Are you going to get things on credit? Just depends on your entire business model. But in San Francisco, just your rent, like let's just say you were going to pay rent for 18 months and your rent was $10,000. You need $180,000 just for rent. Are you paying yourself during this process? Or you have a job? Is someone paying you? Where is this additional money coming from? I got 2 architecture quotes recently just for basic drawings, $20,000 just for basic drawings. You can get discounted, but I mean, every little nick in that you think about, they're not small numbers, and it depends on how comfortable, of course, you want to be. There's a lot of people like in LA, for instance, that are equity applicants, took out mortgages on their houses to continue to pay rent, to hopefully get an equity permit when the city said, we're going to give, 200, but 800 people applied. So now they're going to give 300. That's still 500 people. Long answer of your question, but I would say anywhere between, if all you were doing was distribution and something super simple, maybe you could start with $200,000, maybe. And that's if you were getting product credited towards you, hopefully somewhere in the supply chain, because purchasing, repurchasing all takes place before you get paid on that first purchase. So all things to consider, of course, but upwards into, okay, I want a really nice storefront. I want something really sexy and a lot of good experiences for your customers when they come in. I mean, you could be at an easy $1 million. easy million. I mean, you could be at an easy couple million.
And that's just to get going. Yeah.
Just to get going. Dropping a bucket.
Yeah. Wow.
I like to kind of steer specifically like the average equity applicant toward delivery or type 6 manufacturing. That's the lower barrier to entry and it's more feasible for them. You know, prime example, while you still have a lot of the fees that Marie mentioned, if prime example, you decide you want to infuse 1 or 2 products and do it very well, the barriers to entry are much lower. So, and the same also applies to delivery. So the average individual can possibly open a delivery pending a lot of variables like low price real estate and so forth for maybe 100K or less, maybe start a manufacturing, you know, some very small brand for maybe 50K or less. But once you start really jumping up the hierarchy of licensing, specifically type 7 manufacturing, cultivation, and, you know, the brass ring of retail, as Marie said, you're looking at 500,000 plus, and I've seen a lot of them exceed multiple millions. And so, you know, if you're undercapitalized, it's probably not something you should look at.
Yeah, that's
Which is
extremely
our community, and we're undercapitalized. So that's what, yeah, it's this while I'm hopeful that folks that want to do this, know what it's going to take. I mean, this is a 24/7 lifestyle. The stress level, I mean, coming out, trying to do this work. And this is why I'm so proud to even know Marie Marc or Adolph Ward or Reese Benton, because I know what the drive and tenacity and ambition and just all of the hard work that's going to go into owning a business and trying to figure out your way. And so this is why I bring folks in to talk to them seriously about, what it is they're going to need. Adolph talked earlier about the business acumen. A lot of folks that were directly affected by the war on drugs didn't go to college and they don't have, a lot of the knowledge. So we have what I call collective uplift that goes on at success centers. Folks coming in from industry. I talk to them about the main thing is just love and the love that I have for this community. And they will come in and give love and give them the knowledge that they need to make moves and to build themselves up. This is not going to be easy by any standard. If you've gotten through that door, be proud of yourself. I'm proud of all the equity, and we've had people that have had some success stories, but yeah, we just want to keep building this. So anybody that's interested in building, I would say, make sure that you are, because cannabis is a healing plant. It's something that to me means a lot more than just getting high. It means that you look back and reach a hand out and help someone up to be able to do this. And I don't want my community to be forgotten. That's why I work so hard trying to make sure that we're getting what we need.
Absolutely. The spirit of compassion is essential to cannabis, and it always has been. And I think that the legalization movement, just because it's kind of disconnected from the old compassion movement of Prop 215 and in those days, I think that today, offering mentorship, offering help is an act of the spirit of cannabis through, extending a hand, extending your services, and being open ultimately to helping somebody develop those skills. So basically what you do. So most business structures need to change in order to move away from a repeating pattern of exclusion. So this is kind of a two-part question. Where in the formation of business plans have people failed to include Black, Indigenous, and people of color? And how can new businesses avoid making that mistake going forward?
I think that what happens quite often in the drafting or crafting of a business plan is that there's very little thought process to a workforce in general. And so ultimately, these entrepreneurs or capitalists are so fixated on profitability that they're not thinking about who the workers are that will actually conduct the day-to-day operations. And so I think that if entrepreneurs give more insight to their business plans to begin with, and they're more representative of the communities that they plan on servicing, you can't leave out Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, or else you're not actually doing yourself any justice. So I think that one really falls on the entrepreneurs themselves, that business plans are, I think in today's day that they're used in the wrong way, right? I think everyone is drafting a business plan to try to get funding, when in actuality, a business plan is your blueprint of how you operate your business, which is also a living document that should change throughout time when things change. And so ultimately, I think that, instead of just drafting something that sounds good and will attract investors, more thought should be put into them.
I like to touch on this too. Like, I think the Silicon Valley approach got into cannabis immediately in Prop 64. The growth at all costs, the lose money for 10 years, I can be Amazon too, disrupt. So you see pitch decks filled with all these ways that the prices are going to be driven down and commoditized, and everyone's going to consolidate, right? Like, our industry is unsustainable. Like, the way that we create these businesses, these pitch decks, these pro formas, we're covered in extreme for-profit companies that, to Adolph's point, no, they're not thinking about the workforce. The workforce to them is a commodity. It's not a value. We don't look at people as a value. Even in America, we look at money, drive the bottom down as low as we can, right? So cannabis, it's amazing to me. I don't even think I saw this coming, and maybe I'm just like too impressionable or something, but I was like, this became such a for-profit industry only so fast, where we were a very caring, co-op oriented movement that was very grassroots. And then all of a sudden, when we said, hey, white people, you can make money over here, it just, the entire foundation of everything we knew went out the window tomorrow. We have no compassion programs. Yeah. To me, it's almost like, if you think about a hacker, right? Like, you're like, this dude is a genius. Everything he's doing is illegal, but he's a genius. And for-profit companies, whether, for-profit, private, public, they all want to hire him. They're like, this dude is a genius. All of the people like myself that sold a lot of cannabis before it was ever legal, like, we're like those hackers, but we're not even looked at with that same value. We're looked at like, oh, whatever they do, we can learn it in 5 minutes and replace it and commoditize it and drill it all the way down. Equity hiring, sure. Local hiring, sure. Buy equity products, sure. Like, what do we got to put? What box do we have to check? And I've watched so many companies just check the box, right? But at the end of the day, like, when we look around and we see very limited female representation, we see very limited, LGBT or anything other than white men representing cannabis, when we all know who's in jail for cannabis right now all across the country, whether it's New York to Maine to Florida, and even the hypocrisy with just not even be able to push a button and expunge these things. More hardship goes on us to expunge it. We need to pay more attorneys to fix these things. It's all of our problems, right? But yeah, I mean, to the point of the question, even just diving back in more, look at where the funding's coming from. Who do you think they care about? If the money's coming from Canada, who do you think they care about? If the money's coming from China, from Russia, you're kidding me. Like, you think that they care about taking a percentage of a business that already is very limited profit because of our our over-regulatory processes? And you think they're going to give those very small profits to people that look like us? No. So we need really look. I mean, if it was that simple, we could look outside, right? And we'd see more Black-owned businesses. We'd see a lot of our own people owning businesses in our own communities, right? So what can we do? We need to look at where the funding's coming from, how we can have local funding, how we can have more community-oriented business bases. Not only that, but how do we take the hackers and appreciate them? right? And bring them into what I don't like to call the black market, I like to call it the off-white market. Like, how do we take them from the off-white market and bring them in to the white market? Like, what does that look like? How can that be valued? And that's the changes that I think like would need to be in business plans, you know, and spoken about more than how can we commoditize people and how can we make more money and how can we drive cannabis basically into the bottom tier of the line.
Yeah, I think that ultimately also starts with regulation. Regulation needs to be, but like the regulation of cannabis across the country, regardless of what state you're in, needs to be more accessible and more friendly to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Otherwise, it's always going to be an impossible barrier to entry and forever a white gentrified place. I don't know. That's just how it's going to be. And until like the regulations ultimately provide a blueprint that which these business plans sort of mold themselves under and sort of after. And if the regulation is, again, out of reach for a certain group of people, then that's how the businesses are also going to be. They're going to reflect that. Yeah, so if your company then has an equity issue, meaning everybody in your business is male and or white, is fixing that problem as easy as just hiring African Americans, Indigenous people, or other people of color?
I think it goes back to my comment a few moments ago. You know, it's not just about that, you know, the lower level workforce. It's about your entire way of being, you know, in regards to how you conduct business, right? If ultimately cannabis operators have a lot of ancillary companies we have to rely upon, security companies and accountants and attorneys and architects and contractors and vendors. And, you know, if you're a white operator and you look to the left of you and you look to the right of you and all of your suppliers and vendors are all white men, you're part of the problem. That's not representative of what your community looks like, period. And so ultimately, you know, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that to enter cannabis, just because you build it, they will come. No, again, it's very symbiotic. And so if you don't have these other companies to conduct business with, you can make the best product or grow the best product in the world. But if you don't have the network of retailers to actually reach to sell your product, sits on a shelf and gets old. And so ultimately, you know, again, your lower level workforce, your upper and middle management, your boards, your advisory boards, the people you conduct business with, your professional service providers, if that's not diverse, you're part of the problem, which is why these social equity programs to begin with at all.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the questions that I like to ask companies is, what does your equity footprint look like within your organization? And when they're stammering over it, I'll say, well, it looks like you need some assistance or you need to develop an equity program within your company. I was invited to, I think it was NorCal Cannabis, where I met Jessica Strange, because they had developed a program that they wanted to bring in some of the drivers and the people that were in the non-management positions to bring them up to shadow, to start training them on how they could move up in the company, meaning you get the training, we're going to train you how to be in marketing. If you're really about doing that, you have to come up with some innovative programming within your companies to also, I think, bring people up. And that was one thing that really, it brought tears to my eyes, that, you know, because I'm always speaking about moving, helping equity to move up. And don't just leave them at the lower level jobs. And they brought me in to show me what they were working on. Unfortunately, the layoffs happened after COVID, so I wasn't able to see that to fruition. But just ideas and things like that. People, we can do this in the cannabis industry. We don't have to be like every other industry and continue what's going on in our country. We can be better. I expect cannabis to be better. I'm watching.
and to just be 100% frank, the communities that were infected the worst by the war on drugs, you know, are it doesn't take rocket scientists to see that we're underrepresented. Black women or women of color are actually represented in the cannabis industry a lot more than Black men, which disproportionately, we are the ones that are sitting in prison for low-level cannabis crimes. From my experiences, 98% of the time that I've walked into any retailer in any legalized state, the people who look like me, who are in that, who are working in some capacity in that retail location, are wearing a blue uniform and guarding the product for somebody.
The security, you're absolutely right.
So the truth of the matter is we Black men don't even get low-level bud tender jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Those are reserved for in many cases, I guess quintessentially what is, I guess, looked at as an attractive younger woman. And so ultimately, it's a shame that, you know, ultimately we're good enough to guard the product, but we're not good enough to start on the bottom tier of employment. It's shameful, and we have to do better.
Man, that speaks to so much. And anybody who goes into a dispensary will definitely see that usually there are women in the front. That's just how it's always been. Also at events, maybe when we get back to events, things will be a little bit different. Maybe that'll be a thing we left pre-COVID, you know, in events. So the cannabis industry across the United States, as we've already established, is an incredibly white, straight space. Are you hopeful for the future of cannabis? Do you see businesses successfully making changes regarding social equity? Or, you know, how do you see the landscape as we move forward into hopefully a new era?
I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I have hope. I do have hope. I had, speaking of Black bud tenders, when I first started out here, we had a training program. Well, I do a series on customer service, and this young Black male came in and he wanted to get into the cannabis industry. Well, his name is William Brown, and he ended up being 2019's Bud Tender of the Year award. If you take an opportunity to reach out to someone from this community, especially Black men, because they're the ones, as Adolph said, who have been directly affected the most. He became the Bud Tender of the Year. There are some gems in this community, and they must be recognized. They must be respected. They must be brought into this industry, and they must be treated and moved up in the company. I have folks that have started out on the entry-level jobs that are moving up into buyers and management. So there is some hope for this industry. I see it, but we have to keep nudging at the heartstrings and nudging at them to keep them awake so that they don't fall asleep and start doing like all the other industries here, right?
Yeah,
I agree with Angela. I have hope as well, but it's primarily because as Black people in POC, hope is all we have. The truth of the matter is that, for hundreds of years, our people have had to demonstrate nothing but hope that things would get better. We look at the current climate of this entire country, and all we can be is hopeful. Because if we actually dwell too much on reality, I don't know if many of us would even come out of the house tomorrow. And so we have to be hopeful that things will get better. Do we honestly believe it? Do we think that we'll see that in a quick time frame? More than likely not. But I want to get back onto people of color, and Black people are some of the most patriotic citizens of this country because we believe in something we can't see. We hope for a better day, even though it maybe wasn't yesterday. And so we will continue to be hopeful. How mindful we are of what's actually happening is a different conversation.
hearing you say that makes me hopeful. Truly.
That's why we need to have more Black and brown ownership of these businesses, because we can look to people that look like us and know that where they come from and how to help them build. And so that's why we're all working hard towards doing that, making sure that we have a foot in this door. And so whereas maybe these people that are coming from big industry don't really understand that, we do.
Yeah. We have a question actually from one of our viewers here, and her name is Sabrina. Sabrina says that she's intermittent.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Marc and the
Hey.
Green Nurse Podcast. We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the networked.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
All right, let's go, shall we? Hey, everybody, happy Friday. It's the Friday before Thanksgiving, and we have a lot to be thankful for. The fact that we're live streaming once again on a Friday afternoon. We call this show The Green Rush. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm joined every Friday by the one and only David Rabinovitz.
Good to be here once again, Jimmy.
Thank you so much for joining me again, David. Oh, wait, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try and keep this. This thing always seems to get out of whack. How about that? Is that straight? Let's just see at some point. Anyway, we got a great show lined up for you today. We talk about the business of cannabis, and there's a new part of the business that's using parts of the cannabis plant and infusing it into beverages. In fact, this particular part of the industry has a tremendous upside. And we're going to be talking with people that are involved with infusing these beverages, a variety of beverages, I might add, with some of the cannabidiols, the cannabinoids, those amazing chemicals that are in the cannabis plant. Now, David, you've done a lot of research on this part of the business, or the emerging part of the business. What were some of the things that surprised you, or something that you've learned about it?
So it's been a fascinating week since we decided we were going to have this show. We reached out throughout Canada and the U.S. We've got a lot of great guests. But what I learned was interesting. I've known that CBD and THC oils out of marijuana are fat soluble. So trying to get oil and water to mix, they call it the salad dressing effect. And if you're going to put it into a beverage, you have to figure out how to get it to mix and stay mixed and not separate. And that's a really big deal. It has to do with emulsification, a new term that I actually had to research this week. And we got some great guests that we're going to talk about a lot of the challenges, things like how do you make sure that somebody doesn't take the first few sips of a beverage and now the rest of the beverage has no THC in it. And the issue of you drink a beer, it gets into your system. You have marijuana, it's got to go through your liver, so it takes a lot longer. And you have to be careful of the dosing. You have to be concerned if you're manufacturing it because the THC can stick to the side of the can and not come out. It's fascinating the problems they have to overcome.
The words fascinating, emulsification, decarboxylation.
Yeah, that one is a little bit above me.
These are all the terms that basically are part of taking what is a plant and then picking out different chemicals to infuse into beverages and getting them all to get along and create either a buzz or non-buzz. And this is an interesting thing about the words that we use to describe, okay? When you decarboxylate the cannabis plant, that turns it into a concentrate, okay? I'm pretty much learning this stuff, right? And you can do that at home, or you can use a device like, I believe it's the Ardent device, Chanel Lindsay's company, that does it really well. And then once you have it into a malleable substance, something that you can put into beverages and foods, you're going to get some kind of psychoactive effect, whether that is intoxicating or not. And that's very important. The hemp industry, I learned this lesson from John Dvorak, one of the hemp experts out there, and he explained to me that CBD is a psychoactive component because it does interact with your nervous system. It is a non-intoxicating substance.
Correct.
And that is the biggest differentiator between a hemp plant and a THC-based cannabis plant. A lot of people like to use the word marijuana. I try not to, but that is the one that gets you buzzed, it gets you high. And CBD products will not get you intoxicated. And that's really important. And again, especially goes to marketing. And I know you're a business guy. You understand supply and demand. And most people, when they look at the cannabis plant, they look at it and say, do I want to use this plant to get high, to get intoxicated, or not? Mm-hmm. And I still think there are the or nots. There's more of the or nots than the nots that want to get high. I still believe that the market for hemp is far superior to the market for THC cannabis because of the different ways you can use it. Plus, a lot of people still would just as soon get some of the benefits of the plant using CBD than getting high, getting buzzed.
Yeah. Well, bear in mind, Jimmy, our show is really all about the business of human consumption of cannabis in one form or another. But cannabis has got a lot of applications in construction, in product.
Hempcrete,
right.
Not to be confused with concrete.
Right. Think about all the infrastructure problems we're having across the United States. The reason, because rebar is made of steel. That's that twisted steel that you see that before concrete is poured over it. Concrete can handle a lot of weight, but by itself isn't necessarily very strong. So that you notice on construction projects, you always see those steel rods. That's what gives it its strength. Right. And since concrete is water permeable, water gets in, those bars rust, and then bridges, parking garages, all that stuff begins to fall apart.
Right.
Right. Hempcrete may in fact solve that problem, but that's not today's show.
No, that's not today's show because we're not talking about hempcrete. We're talking about beverages.
Beverages today.
Every beverage company that I know of has some kind of a plan for CBD infused product. But the question I have, and I've asked this question of many scientists, now that I'm talking to a lot of scientists, I've asked this to doctors and registered nurses who have cannabis expertise. And I always ask them, I said, how much CBD is a therapeutic dose? And of course, a lot of the research is still being done, hasn't been done even. So there really isn't a milligram dosage of how much CBD. They haven't identified what truly will be beneficial. However, from a marketing perspective, hundreds of these companies, these big beverage companies, I'm talking about Anheuser-Busch, I'm talking about Nestle Waters, I'm talking about all the biggest water and beverage companies that are out there are dying to start putting products out there that say with CBD.
Yes.
whether that is 2 milligrams or 200 milligrams. And what I know is I take about 1,000 milligrams of CBD a day in droppers. I do. And that helps me deal with my pain, certainly, and helps me with focus. But I couldn't tell you if I went down to 500 milligrams or 50 milligrams or 5 milligrams, it wouldn't be the same placebo effect that's going on in my head.
True.
I can't.
And you won't know whether or not you need 1,000 or somebody else needs 500, right? That has to do with tolerance.
Right. And again, because of the link of CBD to some of the medical diagnoses that are out there, and I'm talking about chronic pain, I'm talking about Crohn's, I'm talking about epilepsy, all those medical diagnoses that has been already proven to be helped by the cannabis plant with THC. There's this entourage effect that's always part of this. And I'm sure the people, I think we have a couple scientists coming on, we've got CEOs coming on. I'll go through the roster in a minute.
We've got somebody who has a PhD, I kid you not, in beer.
A PhD in beer?
A PhD in beer.
See,
so we've got a lot of great guests today, and we got a lot of really knowledgeable people who are trying to blaze the trail for infused beverages.
Right, and we will be talking with them in a moment. But I do want to get to a quick little aside, because we do talk a lot about the business of cannabis. And as you know, over the last few weeks, we've actually had a few more states go to the ballot box and vote in the legalization of adult use of cannabis. And you know what? New Jersey's the biggest state. Okay, let's cut right to the chase. New Jersey has a potential to be the second largest consumer of cannabis to California, which is pretty amazing to me, because California is a much bigger state than New Jersey, right?
Yeah, but people in New Jersey probably have a lot more stress.
Because they're part of the tri-state area of New York and Connecticut. So we do know that New Jersey has voted in adult use cannabis. They've had a medical program for for a few years now, but it is what happens to these new states, the new market of New Jersey, the new market of Montana, the new market of South Dakota, the new market of Arizona. You know that in all these large multi-state operators that are out there that have licenses across the United States, Curaleaf is the biggest one, and they're based right here in Massachusetts, where they do this show from. You know that they already have in place a plan to get into the licensure process that will exist at some point in those states that are now legalized. So many people in those states are trying to figure out how or what is necessary to get into the cannabis business if I'm in New Jersey or Arizona or in South Dakota or Montana. So one of the biggest questions I have and always have is I go to experts. When I don't know something, I go to experts. When I don't know anything about financial or business, I go to the guy to my right in the studio, David Rabinovitz, because he loves numbers and he loves to analyze numbers. I hate numbers, okay? So I always go to experts. So one of our experts in our forming Pro Cannabis Media Gold Club of experts is Bill Perrier. He's an insurance expert. And I asked him today when I did our regular monthly interview with him, and I asked him, I said, if you were one of those people that wanted to get into the business, into the cannabis business, what are some of the things you should do? And here's his answer, and it did not include getting insurance, which I found interesting. Check it out.
The main thing is it's okay to have $1 and a dream, and you're going to make some money. It's not going to happen overnight, and you have to really, really plan. The first thing I would do, after you get your land, whether you're a cultivation site or a building for a dispensary, is I would hook up with an architect and security, because you need an elaborate security system that can take a very long time to plan for your place. I also would, I would keep fundraising money, keep getting money. You're gonna need like not unlimited money, but you need probably $1 million to do it right.
Right.
And those are the two quick things I do. And of course, there's tons of licenses you need and meetings and protocols. The paperwork has to get redone. You can get frustrating. So I would allow time, have a lot of money, And again, get a professional architect, build design firm, and a security company right away.
Really interesting. But David, as someone who works in the social equity community, helps train them get prepared to enter into this industry. The number that Bill came up with, and it's the number I constantly hear from you and from others, is $1 million to start even thinking about opening a legal adult use dispensary, a retail operation. How prohibitive is that for most of the people in the social equity? How prohibitive is it for anybody to come up with $1 million to start a business?
Obviously, it depends on the business, right? If it's a business like cannabis, it is the term du jour. Everybody wants to be in this, right? It's the hot place to be.
Yeah.
Especially now that we have a new administration that should take Washington in January, who has promised that they're going to decriminalize cannabis, right? So that's a big deal. So there's a lot of interest, but it isn't so much about how hard it is to raise the money. At a certain stage, you can raise the money. It's getting to that stage. It's getting the necessary paperwork with the local municipality. It's getting past the landlords. COVID, oddly enough, has helped the industry in a lot of ways. It's an unfortunate disease. It's an unfortunate virus.
Right.
But nonetheless, with the vacancies, landlords are no longer holding prospective cannabis operators over a barrel and saying things like, if you want a letter of intent to apply to the municipality for local approval, I want $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. It gets very expensive, and that's where a lot of capital goes out the door. Pre-COVID, it was, oh, you're a cannabis operator? You sign the lease today and you start making payments immediately. Right? Or you don't, the lease isn't fully cured, but you'll pay us a $5,000 a month hold fee. And with how slow, remember, municipal operations work in either 15 or 30-day cycles. So you go in front of a city council or board of selectmen and they have a few questions for you. It's not, I'll get back to you tomorrow with the answer. It's, I'll get back to you with the answer, and they say, great, we'll see you next month. Well, there's another $5,000.
Right.
So
yeah,
you can go through a lot. There are people who have, in Massachusetts, who have run out of money because it's taken them a year or two to get to the licensing phase, and all their capital went into paying landlords.
Right.
And especially when you're in a great location. You could, like Chauncey Spencer in Boston, in the Mattapan area, I think he was paying over $6,000 a month to hold a space for a couple of years. That chews up that initial capital.
That's crazy.
Really fast.
Yeah, I'm not. You know what? What has bothered me for a long time are the regulations, the different layers to slow down the growth of a new industry. And this is an industry that's projected to go to the billions in 5 years. It's an
in the
industry,
billions.
it's already in the billions. It's going to go to the trillions. That's what I meant to say. In a few years. Trillions in a few years. 10 years anyway. They make it as difficult as possible to get in. And that's what bothers me.
But it's not really that they're making it as difficult as possible, Jimmy. It's more that you've got a lot of people who want to have a say in it, right? We're in Wellesley, Massachusetts. Down the street on Route 9, on the Wellesley-Natick line, is a small wine store.
Right.
Several operators have wanted to open up a marijuana shop there. The neighbors don't want it. So
NIMBYs. We call them NIMBYs, right?
Right, NIMBYs. Not in my backyard. That's
yeah.
right. So you run into those kinds of issues. Now, if you said, well, we're just going to license everybody at the state level and have no local input, the citizens are going to revolt because they're going to the citizens are going to want to say, the local town or city municipal officials are going to want to say, and then you have to weigh in that we have this thing backwards, that we require a location up front. It's the worst design. Imagine saying, I want to know what the location is. You could get the worst operator who gets the best location, and they're the candidate you're going to pick. That's how we got started together back
when you were doing
a year and a half ago, right?
Right.
It was all about this landlord issue of the landlords were controlling the market because the landlords become the gatekeepers. And I'm very curious to see how New Jersey puts together their law and their regulations.
Yeah, and they already had a few issues, but you can carry 6 ounces of weed in New Jersey now.
Yep. But there are issues that close to working out. Their issues had to do with taxation,
Right.
about what the number ought to be. And I read a couple of the articles.
9,
It's
10%.
not like they were really way off from one another.
No.
So, but I also didn't want to read the law until it gets in the final form. It's a couple of 100 pages long.
Right. The other thing about COVID that I find interesting in the cannabis industry is, and right now, just so you know, there's about 10 dispensaries in the Massachusetts area that have to deal with COVID. Netta
Right, I saw your show the other night.
That's right. It was a lead story on the Weed Talk News, which will follow this program. And wasn't just Netta now. I find out other dispensaries, 9 other dispensaries have had to shut down. But here's the thing. They've also discovered you don't have to go in the dispensary to actually buy cannabis. You can go online, order it, and pick it up at curbside.
Curbside pickup.
Which has been part of, we've been doing that for coffee during all the shutdowns, right? I mean, Starbucks shut down. Dunkin' Donuts was available. It's the only time I went to Dunkin' Donuts because I could get it at the curbside. I couldn't do that at Starbucks, but I could do that at Dunkin' Donuts.
Right. Well, pretty soon we're going to have home delivery in Massachusetts, right? November 30th, they're going to hopefully vote those regulations in. And at the bottom of the hour, we're going to have a guest on who's going to give us an update as to what's going on locally, because I think a lot of people locally are watching what's going on with this, but I think some of the other states are as well, to see how Massachusetts handles it, what mistakes we made, so places like New Jersey can do it better.
Right, and we'll be talking with Grant just in a few minutes. But I look at the clock, and it's 4:20. I get to explain this is like my favorite part of the show. Everybody, I think the people that work on this show are just sick of hearing about shanty. But it's important to explain to people, because I still run into people who don't understand the 420, where it came from, the origination of it. Everybody's, that's that April 20th holiday. Yeah, but it actually started in San Rafael, California in 1971 with a bunch of high school kids who would meet after school, 4:20 at the Louis Pasteur statue, and catch a buzz. Then law enforcement caught on, because law enforcement have always been looking out, during the war on drugs, on that public consumption of cannabis. And that's how, there's 420 going on at the corner of Main and Vine Street. Check it out. And then, of course, it became part of the culture. And then at 4:20 at conventions now, everybody takes a break. They catch a little buzz. They go outside, whatever. It's just part of the culture. My 420 signal was whenever Shanty came on the radio. Shanty's a song by Jonathan Edwards. If you haven't heard the song, you haven't been watching this show, because we play it every show at 4:20. So once again, here's Jonathan Edwards' song, Shanty.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 1900. I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more and more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. Going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God, Jonathan Edwards.
All righty then. Welcome back. Welcome back to Cannabis Chat for Friday afternoon. We call it the Green Rush. David Rabinovitz is in studio with us. I'm Jimmy Young, and we're joined by a regular now on this show, Grant Smith Ellis. Hi, Grant. How are you today?
Doing well, Jimmy. Hope you guys are well.
Every week is long now, isn't it? It's getting longer and longer. I was talking to somebody today. I met him January 2019. I said, I don't know about you, but it feels like it's been about 5 years since we last talked.
You take COVID and cannabis and put them together.
Absolutely, absolutely. David, Grant is here because he follows the Cannabis Control Commission. He's on the cannabis beat in Massachusetts. I'm going to let you dictate the conversation.
So the cannabis control, this is more of a local issue, but if you're interested in home delivery, this is an important one. There's been a lot of controversy in Massachusetts over home delivery licenses, and the Cannabis Control Commission had a meeting this past week, and it was not expected there would be major changes to the program, but there were some curveballs that came out of that meeting. And Grant is the guy who is most on top of it. So let me toss it over to Grant. He can bring us up to speed as to what's happening.
Yeah, thank you, David, and that's correct. There was a Cannabis Control Commission meeting yesterday, the 19th of November, and it was a regular meeting where licenses were approved and things like that. But at the end, there was a regulatory policy discussion. 3 big news items came out of the hearing. Number one, there was a 4-hour executive session in the middle of the hearing where Northeast Alternatives apparently was subject to discussion. Later in the hearing, their provisional license for a Tier 6 outdoor cultivator was sent back to staff with the commission saying openly they had negative suitability inferences, which means something that the Cannabis Control Commission discussed in executive session led them to deny that license. The second update from the hearing was about a case out of Salem involving whether host community agreements might be invalidated statewide by the Supreme Judicial Court, which would mean that there would be no host community agreements required at all going forward. We'll see how that case plays out. And the third update was related to adult use delivery. The biggest piece of news is that before yesterday, there was going to be a hard cap of 3 either delivery or retail licenses combined. That cap has been decoupled. An individual entity in Massachusetts can now own up to 3 retail stores and up to 2 delivery licenses. That being the biggest piece of news, I think, on the delivery front.
And what about, Grant, what did they decide with respect to electronic platforms, ordering platforms?
Very good question, David. Definitely an issue that folks who follow this closely will want an update on. Originally, the proposal was that third-party technology platforms like Weed Maps and Leafly could have a financial relationship with only one delivery company in Massachusetts. That would have caused all sorts of problems. So the commission changed, although it's not formal yet, they changed their approach yesterday. The new rules will be that third-party tech platforms cannot invest in any way, shape, or form in delivery companies or any other marijuana companies, but they can have an unlimited number of contracts with delivery companies or dispensaries where they take a cut of a retail sale in order to host a menu online, which I think is a much more viable approach. And there are very strict rules being applied that are actually coming over from the Alcoholic Beverages Commission to prevent things like inducements or pay for play. For example, one rule I thought Britta McBride introduced that was very interesting is on a site like Weed Maps, those rankings cannot be affected by pay to play in any way. So it will be very interesting to see how those sites adapt to these new rules.
And Weed Maps has had a few issues with let's just say the non-legal entities listings of where those dispensaries are in the past. So they're constantly under not investigation, but people are looking at Weed Maps as a company that pushes the envelope. Okay?
Right. My recollection, and you Grant, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think Weed Maps ended up the subject of a federal subpoena over the issue that they were listing unlicensed operators.
Yep. And that itself has a distinct amount of gray area, although obviously those gray areas are becoming smaller and smaller. There was a time where Weed Maps could get away with saying that some of those operators were kind of in a gray area where they didn't know enough to either say they should be on or off the platform. The more states clarify what is a legal operation, what is not a legal operation, obviously the less wiggle room they have.
Right. There you go. Well, that's a great update of the local scene. And Grant, you are the man who has the pulse of the local scene right underneath your microphone there. So appreciate your input here as always, and we look forward to hearing from you down the road.
Talk to you gentlemen very soon. I hope you have a good one.
Thanks you very much. That clears the way out of that. Now we can open up the window to a couple of our new guests that are all about the infused beverage world. And this has been David's thing since the very beginning, so I look forward to hearing from some of these things.
The beginning of the week.
The beginning?
Well, a couple of weeks.
What, you had no interest in infused beverage before this week?
Well, I didn't know as much about it. So once we decided to come up with this as a subject for the show, I did my dive in.
You did your due diligence, you did your research, you're becoming a little talk show host, and I'm so proud of you. And Lord knows I cannot wait to exit stage right on Fridays and turn the whole kit and caboodle over to you, my friend. But we're getting there, closer and closer. But in the meantime, let's see, who do we have in the room? It looks like we filled up the room. Am I right? We do. So we're looking for Ryan MacDonell. Is Ryan there?
Hey, yes. Ryan. Hello. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you? Jimmy Young and David Rabinovitz in studio here. And we're joined also by Kelly Ann Woods. Yes?
Hi.
Kelly, there she is. I knew I'd hear a female voice. And I believe also Cameron. Now, Cameron, is it Meshell?
Meshell.
I knew I was going to screw it up, so I should have just gone with Cameron and Meshell.
We're waiting for Breck, I believe, as well. We have one more Zoom.
Oh, one more Zoom. Okay.
Yeah. Breck.
We didn't know that.
Yep.
Okay.
No, we're good.
Okay.
So, here's what you can count on, Cameron. If you ever go into a casino with Jimmy, if he goes to the roulette wheel and bets on red, put your money on black.
That's cool. So first, let's start with Ryan. Ryan, tell us about Maja Wellness.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it's pronounced Maja Wellness.
Maja, thank you very much.
Yes, Maja Wellness. Yeah.
You know, by the way, one thing that David will learn as a talk show host: spelling doesn't count. It's phonetics. We need phonetic pronunciations of people's names and their companies. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. So, yeah, I'm the CEO of Maja Wellness. We're a small cannabis-infused beverage startup. And so we make a line of function-focused CBD beverages. And right now we're focusing on 2.5-ounce wellness shots that each have a different function. And so I've been in the CBD beverage industry for about 2.5 years now.
Now, this started when you were a student at Babson, if I understand correctly. Yes?
Yeah, that's correct. I was in my junior year going into senior year when we had the idea to start a CBD beverage company.
Wow. And I mean, I'm just amazed at how quickly that people have jumped into this. But that's Ryan. Let's get everybody to introduce themselves. Let's go to Kellyanne Woods next. And now, Kellyanne, I can pronounce your name, Kellyanne Woods, with no problem. How about that? However, the Elixir Company, is it Brujera or Brujera?
Brujera.
All right, so at least I did either or, and I appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about the house of brands that you're involved with.
Sure. So we're a house of brands, as you said, and our focus product right now is called State B, and they're also a line of functional beverages. So it's nice to meet you, my other colleague from the functional beverage line. We're on the same tip.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to market in California in January, and these are a line of CBD THC beverages made with a bunch of other functional botanicals, adaptogens, and nootropics that alter your state of consciousness. So state A is that crunchy state when you fought with your partner, or your kids are driving you nuts, and state B is that state that we all like to reside in. So that's us.
That's great. And we also have Cameron Meshell with us.
Yeah, I'm here with Breck Speed as well.
Okay,
I'm the
great.
founder and president of Farmington Research. We are a B2B company, and we provide cannabis extracts for beverages.
Okay, guys, who's got so we have CBD only beverages, and we do have some THC beverages or not?
Yep, THC. We like the THC.
I knew Kelly. I knew where I was going with that.
Now, Kelly's got a full, if I understand this correctly, you've got a full line of beverages, correct?
Yeah, so I come from the beverage alcohol background, and I just had a successful exit from a craft distillery. So we make, we have a functional mushroom beverage on the way, as well as a Sober Curious line as an alcohol alternative, and then we also have the State B line. So yeah, we have a number of different drinks in our portfolio.
All right, David. Okay, so that means we also have. So you're in California, Kelly, right?
Nope, she's up in Canada. In fact,
Actually, I'm in Squamish, BC, just north of Vancouver.
Right.
But
Wow.
We're launching in California, and then
Okay.
we're also launching across Canada in February.
Oh,
Nice.
Canada. Okay, gotcha.
Royal Bank of Canada 2019 award recipient as well, right?
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. I won a few awards last year, so they definitely help you when you're trying to get money from people.
Indeed. Let's go to Farmington Research. Walk me through this, Cameron, will you please? What exactly you guys do?
Well, we do the cannabis science, basically. We're a cannabis technology company. We provide different varieties of water miscible extracts for beverages in the cannabis space.
And where are you located?
Shreveport, Louisiana.
I've been to Shreveport.
I know, right?
I've actually been to Shreveport.
Yeah, we have a lab here in Shreveport, but we deal mainly in other states. We'll run THC in California and Arkansas, and we do CBD in other states, Kentucky, Hawaii.
Now, guys, let's be honest here, okay? This is a brand new thing. You've got Washington, D.C. pointing fingers at each other, different departments. You've got the DEA pointing the finger. You've got the Food and Beverage Division down there pointing the finger. Who's in charge of CBD regulations, and do you want more regulations? And how much CBD can be infused in beverages right now?
Who wants to take this question?
Yeah. I think it could go right around the room, actually.
Yeah, it could, yeah.
Well, actually, this is Breck Speed. I'm Cameron's partner, and I can take that. I've been in the beverage business for over 30 years. Before that, I was a lawyer. So I've kind of seen the same arc of regulation in a simple business like the bottled water business. Completely unregulated until 1995. It was state by state regulation. And it took a great deal of effort to get the FDA, can you believe it, a business begging for regulation, but we were, the FDA to regulate bottled water, both as far as their labeling requirements and many of the other quality requirements as well. And we're seeing that same arc play out here in a very similar way. The bottled water wasn't a high priority for the FDA because no one was falling sick in the streets. People were getting ill. There wasn't a hue and cry from the public. And so, and we're kind of the same thing here. There's a hue and cry from the public, and there are people wanting to access so many of these wonderful products that are being developed by this great panel of entrepreneurs you have here. But but again, it's not a crying health emergency in the United States in many senses. And so they are taking their time getting it all done. Right now it's a state by state situation. Some states prohibit it completely. Some offer limited ability. Others have taken cannabis all the way to full legalization. And so it's, that's the way we've got to play it right now. But ideally, all these companies would love to work everywhere and work under one set of rules that they can feel confident, and their backers can feel confident, the bankers can feel confident, everyone else that they're getting exactly one, and ultimately the consumer. And then you asked about dosing for all of that as part of that. That's a big part of what will make this much more approachable and understandable for the consumer, and when the market will really take off, when people can understand all that clearly. Right. And that's very well done. I mean, you can tell the guys, you have a law degree. Is that what I heard? Yeah. Well, I'm an AA, Attorneys Anonymous now. I've not been for many years. It's a recovery process. That's all right. No, it's okay. Hey, my brother's an attorney too, and they're necessary. You're very necessary. And more importantly, you guys can actually explain stuff very, you can break it down into steps, almost like geometry, where you can just take it from 1 to 2 to 3. And I appreciate that, because I'm all about simplifying this very complex issue and very complex industry. I got to ask all of you, because I got Louisiana, I got Canada. Where else do we got here?
Austin,
Texas.
All right.
Boston.
Here.
Not Austin.
Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah. You're not far. You should have come in studio for crying out loud. No, I'm only kidding. Where do you do your banking, guys? Where do you do your banking?
Well, I'm lucky.
A sock under the bed. No.
I'm lucky the Canadian. I bank in Canada, and officially my company doesn't touch flower. We're like a we don't hold a license.
Right.
We license our license from everybody else. So we're pretty lucky that way.
Right. No, and you are lucky, absolutely, in Canada. And I was definitely have some friends up there too. But everybody else are MRBs, marijuana-related businesses, and we're put in classifications. And PCM, we're at Pro Cannabis Media, we too are an MRB, and it's a challenge. I mean, I got my money in a credit union for the business, and I'm sure is anybody doing a banking with a bank? And I know there's about 3 or 4 banks in Massachusetts, for instance, that do bank with MRBs. But can I just go right around the room?
Yeah.
Let's see. I can call.
I can start. Go
ahead.
Yeah, I actually bank with Bank of America. I had a pretty close relationship with my local banker in Wellesley when I was at Babson. And so he opened an account for me. And I'm pretty lucky to have that, because I was rejected by probably 10 banks when I was looking for a bank at the start, even by Silicon Valley Bank, which is considered, to be, trying to take in all the new edgy modern startups, and they wouldn't even take in a cannabis company, which is pretty insane to me. But I lucked out and banking with Bank of America right now.
That's actually impressive. Can I ask, do they have special MRB designation, and are your service fees exorbitant?
If they do, I'm not aware of it, because I just have a regular business account like any other business. And if they have any distinctions, I'm not aware of them. So
Ryan, I believe Ryan's business is CBD related, not THC, correct?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, some of the banks, I think it was not Capital One, First Republic, even they told me to my face, it's a disreputable industry. And so, yeah, I was like, that's kind of rude, but that is the general sentiment with banking.
It's a challenge, guys, and I know. And look, we sit here and we're laughing about it. I mean, I had my business bank account closed, and they took my personal too. So you know, I felt like I burst my cherry being a marijuana-based company because I take money from a cannabis product. How much of the stigma, how much education do you guys have to do, not just with your board, but also just the public, and how do you market your products?
Which state do you want to start with?
How about you, Kim? You start first. You start first.
I'm in Louisiana. I can tell you right now, we are about 25 years behind in the public eye. When you mention the word marijuana, people run.
Right.
And we are actually working with the legislature here to change some laws. And you know, I've had representatives and senators just walk out on me when you bring it up. And that's a political game, but there's also the public perception of marijuana in the state of Louisiana. It does have negative connotations, but that number is growing. The acceptance is growing. We have the unfortunate pockets of extreme distrust of marijuana and a lack of understanding and a lack of even wanting to understand what this plant is. So we are faced with an education, not only for the people in this state, but also the lawmakers in this state have to be educated as well. And they are aware of that, and they are receptive to it.
Mostly because they really want the money.
It's all about money.
And that's what you're hearing again and again from folks. The legislatures are resisting it, and when it gets to the public, they pass it resoundingly every time.
Right. And 68%, that most recent Gallup poll a couple of weeks ago, want legalization of cannabis. Yeah. And, you know, you just have to wonder how you're going to educate some of the legislators that are already in these positions about the benefits, not just of the plant, but from a wellness perspective. You know, needless to say, we're pretty well versed about the entourage effect here and how THC and CBD work together. And when you limit the THC to the hemp limit of 0.3%, the CBD doesn't act as active as it would if it had 3 to 4% THC. So go ahead.
That's still being looked at. You know, it's the science is getting there, but you know, again, we're basing everything off pharmacology and anecdotal evidence. So you know, we want to see that evidence, and as you know, there are so many variables with marijuana. CBD, adding the THC levels to
human taking it.
Yeah, what did they eat that day? What's their metabolism like? Right. Are you taking an oil? Are you taking I'll say water soluble product or water miscible product? That's going to affect you differently. Oil takes a longer time to get into systemic circulation. These nano products get into the blood a lot quicker. So there are many variables, and I think unless they really do the research, and of course you know why they can't do the research, it's because marijuana is not legal. You have, you know, it's like you hear Mississippi, the people, I'm not familiar with them, but I've heard stories that they deal with marijuana and they can study it, but they get the worst marijuana. It literally, they tell me like it is the crappiest marijuana that they have to work with. And
they grow it at Ole Miss. It's one of the federal growing sites.
That's probably why they still have the DEA contract to grow it, is they don't grow high potency.
Right. It's 7% THC, just for those of you keeping
That's like the banking. There's banking legislation, and one of the senators in D.C. indicated he'd get behind banking legislation as long as they limited the THC to 2%. Now, you got plants that are 20% THC. You start to limit it to 2%. That's a great way to say, yeah, you can bank it, just nobody qualifies.
Look, I'm amazed that you guys are in business making this stuff and being able to get it out to consumers. Can we go back to the percentage of milligrams in each one of your products? Can we identify that? Let's start with Kelly because she's up in Canada, and heck, it's legal up there. I love that.
Sure. So what we've done is we have a CBD. Okay, so we make products and we sell them into different markets. And so we had to figure out a way of marketing our products that made sense from a marketing perspective, but that we could talk about them in the different markets. So our CBD line, which is launching in California and will go to other states by Q2 next year, is 10 milligrams of CBD. And the decision for that was based on the fact that the maximum amount of milligrams of cannabis in Canada, whether it's CBD or THC, is 10 milligrams. And then for our other products, which is our THC and our CBD products, because they've been done with a bunch of other botanicals and because we're trying to create a different state, they range across the board. So our product Zing, which has bacopa and a bunch of really great brainy nutraceuticals, is 10 milligrams of straight THC, whereby Sparkle, which is euphoric and aphrodisiac, has 5 milligrams of CBD and 5 milligrams of THC. So when you can start to play with the amount, like, you know, when you like have a little hit of a joint, but then you smoke a whole joint and it's a very different experience. It's kind of like that from the beverage perspective, in that we're trying to encourage, I mean, let's be honest, we're all kind of consumers somehow. So I know how I feel after a little sip of something as opposed to a massive amount of consumption, right? So
right.
That's what we're trying to play with. And I think one of the interesting things that's coming out of the beverage market now is people are starting to consider that this is an alternative to alcohol for some people. And it's also like I guess it's a Zoom lubricant as opposed to a social lubricant. So smaller amounts and in varying forms create different effects. So that's our perspective on that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Cool.
Breck, can we go to Breck and talk to him a little bit about that same thing?
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, we're working with a whole variety of different companies. We're their technology supplier, whether it's THC or CBD or CBG, and or any other of the components that they vary. And it's just amazing to see the innovation. I love listening to Kelly. It sounds like she's got some amazing products. But we work with companies that will modify exactly what they want to do, whether they want something. So we're working with a company from Kentucky that does shots. We work with a company from Hawaii that does it in a ready to drink bottle. We're working with a really innovative company in Arizona that does a tea, ready to drink tea. And it's everything as far as the THC hit when they have THC in it, everything from, a very low amount, 2.5 up higher.
Yeah.
It seems to me, and then there's one company out in California that called Tinley Beverages, and they have two different kinds of products. They've got one that's kind of like a beer substitute. And so they want people to buy a 6-pack. And so it's a relatively low dose each, but they also have a line of products that have a liquor-like dose. So you take a shot of this liquid product and put it in something else. And so it's just amazingly innovative right now, and not just with the cannabis part, but everything else they mix up into it, and to really try to create a use occasion. So it's fun.
Cool.
So I got a question for Ryan. How did you guys test market out your product?
Well, we started by running a lot of focus groups at Babson while we were all still students there. And so we tested the market first with, people that we knew close to us. And then after that, it was a very long process of going and finding every, health and wellness store in Boston, gyms, grocery stores, pitching to all the managers and asking them if we could, have their sales data, which is really, really difficult for CPG companies to get. Someone needs to figure that out. But for the retail data, what we would usually do is host many tastings at one location and do that for many weeks at a time. And so we would spend tons of hours in the store giving away free products and just trying to gauge the public perception of CBD and, trying to, incentivize filling out like a survey and things like that. So that's how we originally got the initial consumer data, which led us to rebranding into Maja Wellness, and it used to be called Nectar. We couldn't keep that name for a bunch of legal reasons. And so we had to rebrand to what we are now. And we chose a shot because it used to be a 12 fluid ounce drink. And our main feedback was, reduce the amount of liquid and double the dose. We used to be, 10 milligrams of water soluble or nano-emulsified CBD. Now we're only 2.5 ounces and 20 milligrams. And so that was all completely done from speaking to hundreds of people over the course of like 4 months. So that's how we did our initial testing.
Did you do any market testing in New York?
Oh, we did. Yeah, actually.
This is a great story.
I completely forgot about that. I mean, I was just thinking.
This is, just so you understand, Ryan, here's why we got you on today. Because I remember when, just for fair disclosure, my significant other is one of the teachers at Babson, and he was in one of the, either in her class or he was one of the teams she was advising. And I heard the story of what happened in New York. It was fascinating.
Right. I completely forgot about that story. That was the very initial. So my co-founder was living in Manhattan at the time, and so we had this idea, and we came up with the first general recipe, which was like ginger, lemon, aloe, and CBD. So we got all those ingredients together, slapped on a label that we like printed out from an actual printer, and bought some empty plastic bottles. And we went around to a bunch of bodegas in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And we basically said, it was one shop owner who had multiple locations who said, we told him you could have the bottles for free, just have them on consignment. And if they sell, let us know. And so we walked around and handed out these bottles. And so before we got back to the apartment, which was 3 hours later, the owner of the shop called us up and said, yeah, we completely sold out in all 7 locations. We want to buy 500 units. And so that's how we were like, okay, I think we're onto something here. Wow. Even though it was super illegal in a sense. I mean, you shouldn't be doing that, but we wanted to test it and see if we had an actual product. And so they confirmed it, I think, at least to a small degree.
Ryan, that's wonderfully old school. It is.
I think that's the way to do it.
Grandparents did it.
Bootlegger.
Yeah.
I wouldn't quite say bootlegger. It was great. I remember when it happened. I remember.
Ryan, are you bottling yet? Are you up and bottling in Boston?
Actually, our plant is in Virginia because it was hard to find a co-packer that wasn't ridiculously expensive for the quantity we wanted to make, and so it just made sense.
Yeah. Well, reach out to us after this, and we can help you out finding some places.
Definitely, that'd be great.
That's why I love what we do.
We deal with everyone. So if you need any assistance or anything in a certain state, you want a bottle, you need a bottler for any of your products or anything, hit us up. We'd love to.
I definitely will.
So this is why I love what we do. We put everybody in a room and you do business with each other. It opens up all sorts of opportunities and that sort of thing. I find it really fascinating, and I think it was Breck. You spent a lot of time in the alcoholic beverage industry, right?
Well, no, in the non-alcoholic beverage industry, but so much of my product was distributed by people that also distributed alcohol. So
okay.
We distributed through beer wholesalers primarily, but we also did wine and spirits wholesalers to get to the on-premise trade.
And that industry looks at cannabis. There's different views of this, but for the most part now, I think they're embracing that cannabis is coming in, and I think it's one of the reasons why Constellation Brands dumped so much money into canopy growth, and it was Bruce Linton's deal, I'm pretty sure, that made this happen. But I'm fascinated the fact that the alcoholic beverage industry is starting to embrace the future of cannabis and using CBD with or without the THC. Are you finding the same thing in all of your worlds there?
Absolutely. And it is an existential threat to the alcohol business. As your Canadian guest was talking about, it's people use this in lieu of alcohol, and so they're ready to embrace it. What's going to be very interesting, though, is this is a crossover product in a era when all the distribution channels are changing. So Right now, Coca-Cola is coming out with hard Topo Chico. They're going to have to go through alcoholic distributors for that, licensed distributors. And so many of the licensed alcohol distributors are also coming up with non-alcoholic products.
And that poses a problem too, Breck, with distributing that stuff. You know, getting that stuff out into the marketplace, it's a problem because in Louisiana, you know more about this, even though I'm from Louisiana, you know how the beer distribution works in Louisiana, and it's difficult. So
the beer wholesalers and the liquor wholesalers have been reluctant to go forward right now because they're all federally licensed. And so if someone went crazy at the federal level and decided to bring the hammer down on all of that, they could be in jeopardy with their license. So they're waiting for clarity on that. As soon as that happens, then we're off to the races. Canopy and Constellation brands will be going forward, but we do know that the big beer giants are also have done a lot of development and are thinking about all of this within the lab. They'll be coming out. But the real wild card is which non-alcoholic companies like Coke or Pepsi or someone else may decide to be in.
In fact, I just
all different kinds of other wellness drinks right now, and this is a wellness additive.
Right.
You know, it's a whole bunch of different things.
Right.
Well, I just received an email to tell you what's going on in Louisiana and how we're trying to push this through in beverages. There is a committee meeting on this topic, basically CBD. They're talking about CBD and the safety in alcohol. So the ATC has a committee meeting coming up next week, and we will be discussing how safe that is. What are they going to do? What's the next move for alcohol and CBD consumption? Will it be allowed? Is it, these are things we're in an infant stage. When you go to California, it's already been discussed and passed and done.
Right.
And you're like in a new world here in Louisiana. But those are some of the challenges that we face.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys. We're going to redo this room again. And I think we're going to devote more than just a half hour to all of you because I think there's so many issues here. And I love the fact that we had Canadians, Louisiana, Texas, Boston. I don't even know where everybody's from. But I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. We got to clear out the room because we got another room coming in. And it's a perfect time for me to say, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Let's all use it responsibly. It includes the beverage world too. And I can tell you this, I take 1,000 milligrams of CBD a day, okay, in droppers, okay? Yeah. So 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, and I'm going to leave my body to science because there's plenty of THC in there too, Hey, thank you all. Have a great holiday, safe holiday. Let's do it again sometime in December. And I'm going to leave it all up to David to coordinate it all because he's the one who put us into this room together. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet you.
Nice
all right, there you go.
Bye.
And we're going to take a break, and then we're going to fill up the room again with 3 more people to talk to. And this is going to be interesting as we continue along here with our Cannabis Chat, the Green Rush on this Friday. Don't go away.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro-cannabis story.
And I love pro-cannabis media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love pro-cannabis media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love pro-cannabis media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro-Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love pro-cannabis media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Marc and the Green Nurse Podcast. We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro-Cannabis Media.
Hey, welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Friday afternoon from the studios of Pro-Cannabis Media here outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I'm Jimmy Young. I'm the founder of Pro-Cannabis Media, but I'm joined every Friday by David Rabinovitz. We talk about the business of cannabis and how challenging that is. And this particular subject of infused beverages has opened up a whole new world for so many people. And David put together a great group. We've got Dr. Keith Vila is with us. Jason Reposa is with us. And did we end up with, no, right now those are the only
two. That's what we have, but that's what we're going to go with. This is going to be a great, this 30 minutes is going to be great.
Ready,
Not
David?
The last 30
you go. Talk to each one of them. Let them introduce themselves. Tell them ask them about what they do, how they are. Go ahead.
Great. We've got our two guests. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment, but people like to make jokes like, gee, I got a PhD in whatever. We're about to meet somebody who's got a PhD in beer.
I love that.
Keith?
Congratulations.
Okay, sounds like I'll go first. So, yeah, my name is Keith Villa. I'm the co-founder of CERIA Brewing Company. I do have a PhD in brewing science from the University of Brussels in Belgium. I was there before Belgium became this beer paradise that everybody thinks of today. So I was there from 1988 until 1992. I got my doctorate. While I was there, I was able to learn all the traditional ways of brewing beer, as well as the scientific background for what's happening during the brewing and fermentation and aging stages. Let's see. Then in 1995, I created Blue Moon Brewing Company. So if you've had a Blue Moon beer, I did that back in 95. It grew to become the biggest craft beer brand in the United States and in the world. I launched it in a bunch of countries. It's in about 25 countries right now. And then I retired from Blue Moon and Blue Moon / Molson Coors. And my wife and I created CERIA Brewing Company because we saw that cannabis was legal in Colorado. And what we wanted to do was bring it to consumers in a socially acceptable format that is not smoking and really not edibles, but something that people can stand around and socialize with. Because let's face it, you can't really socialize very well by smoking, or you can't socialize or toast the bride and the groom with a gummy. So yeah, we thought, it's beer is the everyday beverage of the average person. Wine is great, spirits are great, cocktails are great, but for us, beer is just that everyday beverage. So what better way to introduce cannabis to drinkers and to people who are interested in it than with beer? So we created CERIA Brewing Company.
And are you in Colorado?
Yes, I am. I'm a native. I was born and raised here, except for the time I lived in Belgium getting my PhD.
Yeah, no, that's great.
And Jason? Jason is an aspiring entrepreneur who is moving at rocket speed. And I don't want to steal your thunder, Jason.
Sure. So my name is Jason Reposa, and I do not have my PhD, which is kind of embarrassing. But
neither do I.
I'm already outclassed on this call. I don't know what's going to happen now. So basically, I would qualify myself as just a nerd. I'm just a geek. I just like to take on new challenges, and I like to figure out problems for myself. And so this is the latest challenge of kind of where I want to go with the next 10 years is what I like to say in my life. So my company is called Good Feels, and Good Feels is a cannabis company in Massachusetts. And so I'm very familiar with the entire, legal cannabis market, as well as the entire hemp side as well, because I've done quite a bit of that, which is why I was really interested in what Ryan was saying. With that said, though, I have a range. I'm actually like a tech guy. I have 20 plus years in technology. So starting as a programmer all the way becoming a CTO in, ad agencies and stuff like that. And so I am now in Massachusetts. I came here about 3 years ago from Brooklyn. But I was born and raised in Massachusetts for the first 24 years of my life. And so now that I'm back in Massachusetts, I'm just trying to figure out the next thing I want to do. And I landed on cannabis through, kind of a long story, but I won't bore you with that just yet.
I don't think there is a boring story in the cannabis industry. It's funny about what Keith said about the socialization. Now, I'm going to counter that with actually saying I actually think that cannabis is built-in socialization. There is that bonding that goes on in the passing of the joint circle, if you will. But I totally understand where you're coming from on the beer side. However, there are certain people out there that find out later in life that they're allergic to hops. And that kind of eliminates a lot of beers, doesn't it?
Not necessarily, because as you may well know, or maybe you don't, if you're not a beer drinker, there are many varieties made with hops that really don't have the hop compounds in them, as well as modern hard seltzers, which are beer-like beverages fermented. And hard seltzers don't have any hops. So there are a lot of alcoholic beverages, beer-like beverages, that don't have hops. And you're right, some people do become allergic to hops over time, but I would also argue that there are quite a few more people who are allergic to smoke, whether it's tobacco smoke or cannabis smoke. So smoke in and of itself is not as social as it was in the 1950s and 1960s.
Right. And in fact, a lot of people who actually consume cannabis on a regular basis are trying to avoid smoking, even though there is no research and nothing that ties it to the same kind of dangers you would get from cigarette smoke. But I understand about the odor part for sure. David?
But it can still be an irritant, right?
Right. Oh no, I think that's what he said. A lot of people don't like the smell of weed. I mean, they find it abhorrent. So.
Yep. It's an acquired.
Well, further than that, there's people with asthma who can't be around smoke. So
right.
But they have asthma, and if you smoke around them, whether it's cannabis or anything, they cannot be around that. So smoke in and of itself is really an irritant to socializing.
There you go. Interesting.
So at the top of the show, Jimmy and I were doing the introduction, and I was explaining some of the things I've learned over the past week or so doing research. Emulsifications, the salad dressing effect, all these great terms that apply to infused beverages. But what I learned, I'd had a sense of it beforehand, but it really came to me very hard about how difficult it is to infuse a beverage with THC or CBD and get it to not separate. Talk to us about the science, about what you have to do to actually make the drink work, so you're not going to worry about the THC sticking to the side of the can, that the first 2 sips are what gets you high, and then you end up throwing the rest of it out because it's separated. How do you approach, what are the issues and how do you approach that?
Keith?
Who wants to go first?
I guess I can go first, sure. Yeah, so with cannabis and all the cannabinoids, and I've heard people, I'll start out by saying some people call them cannabinoids. Whenever I hear that, I say, oh yeah, do you really like the cannabis plant and do you smoke cannabis? Because it's cannabis. And so it's cannabinoids. That's the way I prefer it. I've studied languages for quite a while, and when you have 2 letters, you hold that syllable for a bit, cannabis. So anyway, so with cannabis, cannabinoids are very difficult to work with because they're organic compounds, they're oily, and so they do not readily go into water-based beverages. So you have to make them go in. You can do that in a number of ways. But more than that, I'll skip forward and say that the problem with them in beverages is that when they are in cans, the can liner is a sprayed on liner so that you don't have that metallic taste from the aluminum. And so the liner will attract organic compounds. And so you'll have CBD, THC, all the cannabinoids sticking to that liner unless you put the right emulsion in to make it slippery and not stick. So that's a very important thing to know when you're going about making beverages with cannabinoids. The second thing is the actual emulsion itself. There are, a couple types. There's I call them the old school ones, which are vegetable gum-based emulsions, which work. They're very nice. You can get cannabinoids to be water compatible in that respect. And then there's the more advanced one, the nano emulsions. I'm writing a book right now about brewing with cannabis and how to make cannabis water compatible. It's not water soluble. We should get that straight right away. A lot of people have that confusion and they say, oh, it's water soluble, but you can never get it water soluble. Water soluble is when you have a compound like table salt. Let's imagine table salt. You put it in water and mix it around. It's water soluble. What happens is you have 2 compounds, sodium and chloride. They're bound together in the crystals that you see in table salt. When you put it in water, they come apart and you have sodium and chloride. That's water soluble. With cannabis, it'll never come apart and become water soluble. So what you have to do is make it water compatible. Very similar, but it's not water soluble. So what you do is you try to make it water friendly by using these different types of emulsion. And so there are different types, like I said, and the modern type are the nano emulsions. And all the research I've done really is interesting because it points to about the 1970s, maybe early 80s. The Soviets, as I understand it, they did a lot of work on doping their athletes with steroids. And so the stories I hear are that they figured out how to use vitamin E-based compounds to make these oily steroids water soluble. So they would put it in water. And of course, the athletes, right before a race, maybe they couldn't be seen shooting up with steroids, but they had water-soluble, nano-emulsified steroids, and they could just gulp it down in their water bottle, and then just 30 minutes later have that energy to just take off and run or lift weights. And then as the Soviet Union imploded, that technology started spilling out to the Western world. Pharmaceutical companies came up with it, and now cannabis companies are using it because it's so very effective at making cannabinoids water soluble, water compatible, and having a very fast bioavailability and effectiveness in the human body. So again, you've got old school emulsions, modern emulsions, nano emulsions, and then you've got the can liner. the three things you have to take into effect when you're dealing with cannabinoids.
I tell you, I wish I studied chemistry because I have no clue.
I'm glad I didn't study chemistry. Jason, take us through what you're doing about the genesis of the business and some of the challenges in trying to actually perfect what your formula is.
Sure. I mean, there's a ton to consider, as Keith mentioned. Among even just narrowing down on those three things, the emulsification, the emulsifier itself, there's a selection process involved, right? So in the tech industry, you would typically, the way technology is done nowadays is you take off the shelf components, you put them together and you say, here's a new piece of software, right? You add your magic to it, of course, but it's all kind of there. With the emulsifier situation, there are 6, I think, that I've talked to, and probably 4 or 5 that I've sampled that have pre-ready emulsifiers ready for you to just use and then combine it. Of course, you have to use different equipment and specialized stuff like that. But the emulsifiers exist on the on the web. You can just go on, just order it, and you don't have to even talk to anybody. They'll ship you a kilo of it to then with instructions on how to do all these things. So a lot of this is readily available now. However, there's problems with a lot of these things, right? So I'm looking for something that's plant derived, for instance, right? So one of my qualifications is that it can't be from an animal source, right? So I have to, that eliminated like 2 of them right off the bat, right? Then there's the, and this is, we're just talking about the nano ones, right? So as Keith mentioned, there's a subgroup that goes above nano, and for everybody who's listening, nano means nanometers, so below micron level, which is really, really tiny, right? And so, if you have questions around that for the people watching, I can kind of go into a little bit more about that and what that actually does to the particle size. But basically, with the emulsion side of things, you're talking about, let's say, out of those 3 that I've tried, 2 of them just taste awful, like right off the bat. So every time you add it, then all of a sudden your beverages taste super bitter or a little bit oily or things like that. So I'm in the process right now of developing my own trade secrets for my own formulation. And so I've done a few of these in the past. I haven't been happy with them, which is why I went to off-the-shelf stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm doing what's best for my business, which is speed to market and something that has gulpability, which is the beverage term for just, you can just chug it and it tastes good, right? And so those are kind of my 2 qualifications. The rest of the nano stuff that comes along with that, which, depending on your understanding of how nano works and the water miscible side of it, the fast onset, the bioavailability, all these things. And so, for instance, Jimmy, I know you'd mentioned that you take 1,000 milligrams of CBD, right, a day. And well, with a higher bioavailability, a different nano tincture, which is part of my product line versus just a straight beverage, I have a nano tincture as well. That nano tincture has more bioavailability, right? And so the traditional way of taking a tincture, for instance, is you take a dropper and it's MCT oil dropper or whatever, MCT oil base, you put it under your tongue and you wait a minute and then you swallow it, right?
Right.
Well, kind of works, kind of doesn't work. This is, a lot of this is very gray. It's not very scientific in a lot of cases. And so I'm glad we have people like Keith on this mission of trying to figure out the science behind all of this. I'm more of the startup person, and I'm just trying to accomplish very specific goals. But when you're taking 1,000 milligrams, if you take a nano version of that, you need approximately like a 4th or a 5th of what you normally would take. So you can get away with like 200 milligrams a day, in other words. And the reason for that is simply because with 1,000 milligrams, it goes through your entire GI tract, hits your liver, and your liver says, I'm going to give you, 200 milligrams of it right now. And then the rest of it, you're just going to excrete, right? And so your body determines that. It depends on what you ate, depends what time of day it is, depends what mood you're in. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Keith can answer that, I bet. However, if you do nano in the same, cannabinoids, you do nano on top of it, and then, water miscible, water soluble, water compatible, whatever you want to call it, increases the bioavailability 4 or 5 times. And therefore you can actually just take a lot less and it goes into your bloodstream a lot faster also. Okay. And so therefore you're able to take a lot less dosage, although you're getting an emulsifier along with it, which is typically like a coconut oil base anyways, and so, modified. And so it's basically the same ingredients. It's just the way you rearrange them to make them higher bioavailability.
Right. And by the way, that's a cumulative amount of CBD. I just want to say I don't take it all at one time.
But you can take 40 milligrams 5 times a day.
Yeah. Well, I don't do that. Look, all I can tell you is I take a whole bunch of stuff in the morning, and then I take a whole bunch of stuff at night, and I wake up the next day and it's a nice day. And, I don't wake up with pain in the middle of the night, which I used to in my arthritic hands. So.
What type of shelf life do these products have?
Good question.
It depends on the emulsification, really. It depends on if you're bundling it with a lot of preservatives, for instance. There's all these type of preservatives you can add into it that'll make it stable for a lot longer. I'm trying to take a more natural approach. Everything that I'm doing is plant derived, and so I'm aiming for at least a 6+ month stable shelf stability without refrigeration.
Hey, Jason, are you a vegan?
I am.
I had a feeling. That whole plant thing,
I never said it though.
No, but you talked about plants in a very respectful way. I just want to say, I read between the lines. What can I tell you? I have a couple of vegans in my life, kind of, and they've enlightened me. But I'm old school. I'm still meat and potatoes. I get that my diet probably contributes to my inflammation issues, but I'm very stubborn about my diet. I feel like this is the way it's been, and I weigh 5 pounds more than I weighed when I played college soccer in the 70s. So my metabolism is still pretty active, I guess, huh? David, you probably can't agree with that, can you?
Oh, I didn't know you back in the 70s, and I'm not going to try to make that statement. I'm finally under 200 pounds with a lot of struggling, and I'm fighting to get under 190.
I know a lot of people hate the way I eat because how can you not be weighing, all the whatever.
So let's talk about the time it takes to feel the effect, right? You have a beer, you have a
glass of wine,
gin stinger, my favorite drink.
Okay.
If I'm taking an alcohol, you feel the effect pretty quickly. Infused drinks, is it similar or a much longer wait period?
That's the goal, ultimately. I'll let Keith have his response, but ultimately, we're trying to make something. So there's a bunch of reasons why people are doing this. And Keith had already mentioned a few. I've got a few of my own. And at the end of the day, a lot of people are trying to match that. The way we say it is 5% alcohol is like 5 milligrams of THC. You go through that step when you're having a beer or you're having a THC-based seltzer, your body's slowly ingesting that and putting it into your bloodstream. And so therefore, we're trying to time it around the same time. There's different science points to different directions with a lot of these things. And so you can go super, super small, like 20 nanometers, which is, you can't even imagine that's just tiny, right?
Right.
That will get you within 5 minutes, you're going to start feeling the effects, similar to, for instance, a beverage, like an alcoholic-based beverage, or even similar to even just smoking at that point or vaping.
Yeah.
And if you do, say 50, 100 nanometers, things like that, as you start approaching 100 nanometers, it takes a little bit longer, right? So it's the particle size, because the smaller the particle, the faster it can get into your bloodstream. And when you're talking about, those small things, you're also talking about that ramp up effect, but then you're talking about coming back down. And so it's also very similar to alcohol, at least anecdotally, sample size of 1. It's very similar to alcohol in the sense that if you have one drink, a THC-based beverage, after about an hour, it's kind of out of your system at that point. And so it does have a lot of similarities to alcohol in that sense.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
It definitely does, and it's as Jason said, it really depends on the size of the. They're called micelles, little micro or nano emulsified particles. If you can imagine, like it looks almost like a basketball shape, and the cannabis particle inside of it. If it's a big beach ball size, it's going to take a long time to get into your system. If it's real tiny, it doesn't take very long at all. So to answer your original question about alcohol, alcohol gets into the system on average, 12 to 15 minutes. You start to feel the warming effects of alcohol. And with cannabis, it can take as short as that time. Well, obviously, if you smoke it, that's the most fastest way. If you have nanoparticles, it's very fast. It can be on the order of 5-10 minutes, and bioavailability is high. So a 5 milligram serving of THC with one emulsion could give you the same effect as a 1.5 milligram serving in another emulsion. So really, everything depends on what you're doing and how you want to go about delivering the product.
And I got to tell you, you need a degree in beer. You need a degree in chemistry to understand this. And it's interesting how the public keeps coming out and saying we want legalized cannabis. 68% is what the Gallup poll said. But when you say that and then you actually dig into the product and understand it, there's so many different factors. And now you're putting in alcohol, and now you're mixing up the different 2-to-1, 1-to-1, 10-to-1. I got to tell you, I'm confused beyond. And I like it when it was as simple as, rolling it up, cleaning it on the album cover or the back. This was great. The clipboard was a great cleaner back in the day.
I should clarify that it is illegal to mix alcohol and cannabis.
Right.
So from a federal level, you can't do that. And from a state level, you can't. So we have to actually produce non-alcoholic beer. We produce it at 0.00%. So there is no alcohol. It's all cannabis.
Right.
And how do you get the alcohol out of the beer?
There are several ways. I wrote an article earlier this year for the Craft Brewers Association on how to do that. There are 4 different ways, but primarily the two most effective ways are to use a process called reverse osmosis, which is kind of a high-tech filtering system to filter out the alcohol. And then another way is called vacuum distillation, which is another high-tech way to distill out the alcohol. And you could get down to 0, but you just have to be below 0.5% to be legal.
Well, I'll admit it. There are a lot of times over the years I probably have been breaking the law. I'm really sorry to admit this. Am I going to go to jail now?
Yep.
You're on the way.
All right. Hey, Jason Reposa and Keith Villa,
yes.
Villa, just like that. All right. It's a Belgian thing, right? The L's are silent. You roll it. It becomes a Y. Villa. Right?
There you go.
Colorado thing, Jimmy.
It's a Colorado thing. All right. Hey, guys, thank you so much for enlightening us a little bit, educating us. Appreciate it. We can certainly check you out on LinkedIn and online, but we have another room to fill. So we're going to move along. We're going to take a little break. But when we come back, we'll have a couple of more. But Keith and Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Yep, have a good weekend, good holiday. All right, and we'll be back with more of the Cannabis Chat on a Green Rush Friday after this. Don't go away. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And as a sportscaster on TV and radio for 25 years, people always thought I was an expert on sports. They used to come up to me at bars and go, "Hey, sports guy, are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup or what?" I didn't know then, and I don't know now. Just because I reported on sports and talked intelligently about my love for sports, I was not an expert. I was a talk show host, an anchor, a reporter. Sure enough, the same is true in the cannabis industry. Now, even though it's been around for thousands of years, research is just beginning. The difference, of course, is that there are no real experts in the cannabis space. However, we all believe that we're experts in our own field. For instance, we at Pro Cannabis Media have 75 years of combined experience in commercial media, buying, production, and strategic market planning. Now, we want to help you control your message. After all, you're probably considered an expert in your field, whether that's lighting or containers, law, interior design, or even security systems. We already have an expert in the insurance business for MRBs. That's marijuana-related businesses. Bill Perrier from Charles River Insurance is our expert. He's a member of our PCM Gold Club of experts, and he explains that one of the largest insurers in the world is now writing insurance for cannabis farmers.
Lloyd's of London, 325 years old, the standard bearer in the market, is with a company called Chesterfield Brokers that have launched this parametric insurance for crops.
Insurance is all about timing, and it's a shame we couldn't have got these programs up for the farmers and the other cannabis growers who've been really affected by those West Coast fires.
We also have an accountant for the cannabis space. He's a CPA, Rick Leneve of Accounting Buds, and we rely on both of them for their expertise, and we showcase their expertise in our news and talk shows. In fact, we'll put them inside our original content, and we can talk to them. It's kind of like product placement. So show off your knowledge inside our content as we position your expertise in your field. And you do that by joining our Cannabis Gold Club of Experts. That's where you get a chance to show our audience your expertise in your field. This group of entrepreneurs will serve as a referral network in order to generate leads for your business and, of course, build your expertise because it'll be shared during our weekly news and talk shows. So, if you want to take advantage of our following and the original content we produce on a weekly basis, contact me, Jimmy Young, or our sales team today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
All right, welcome back to the final half hour of Cannabis Chat on a Friday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, alongside David Rabinovitz. This is our Friday Green Rush show where we talk about the business of cannabis. We've been talking about infused beverages, but now we've got two guys in our Zoom room. One is Sohan Shen from MCR Labs, and the other is Marc Rosenfeld from CommCan, which is out of Millis, Massachusetts. So we're back into the Massachusetts mode here. We've been international today. We've had Canada, right? We've had Louisiana. That's another country unto itself. All right. Marc and Sohan, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, great.
Thanks for having us.
Marc, take us through CommCan, and you have I know your story, but share that with our audience, if you don't mind, about how you came to be in Millis, Mass, and how you've got yourself a little vertical in Millis, Mass. Go ahead.
Well, I came to be in Millis, Mass, because my grandfather landed here from Russia.
Marc, come closer to your microphone. You're about 5 feet away from it. You got to get a little closer.
All right, can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Now we can hear you. Perfect. Thank you.
And I'll lean in.
There you go. Thank you.
So I say I came to be in Millis, Mass, because my grandfather came here from Russia, in 18 or so. And we've been here ever since. So CommCan is Commonwealth Cannabis Company. And it is my brother, my sister, and I. We all have different functions within all of our family businesses. We were second generation real estate developers. We've done other things through the years, but most recently CommCan, I serve as the CEO, so I handle most of the day-to-day operations. We came about not in the original go around under Governor Patrick, but after that sort of settled down and Governor Baker came in and revamped the process. We were among the first groups, June 2015, to file our paperwork. We had plants growing in December of 2017. The delay there was not only a function of the licensing process, but the fact that we were the first new construction cultivation facility of this size in the state. So we built a 60,000 square foot building, promptly built out the first floor of 30,000 square feet, had plants in the ground in December of 2017. Linked that, since we were medical, again, remember this was before there was an adult use program, so linked that to a medical only dispensary on Route 9 in Southborough, and got the okay to commence sales there in summer of 2017, summer of 2018. So 3 years, and I remember it forever, it's 3 years and 14 days after we filed our initial, what they called back then the application of intent with the Department of Public Health. So that's where we're at. We've since then, we just completed the build out of our second floor. We jumped from a tier 3 to a tier 5 cultivation facility. We have a fully operational lab for concentrates here, 2 different methods of extraction, with a third being built out right now. We have a kitchen. We have a full edibles line, a full concentrates line, several other sort of sub brands within CommCan.
Cool.
And I've known Sohan since the beginning. Sohan used to show up and pick up our lab samples for MCR Labs, and he's gone to take over the world.
and is busy about that. Sohan from MCR Labs. Obviously your job is to get people like Marc to use your testing facility. And obviously you're doing a good job, because I understand the testing facility is just inundated with a ton of stuff, ton of tests right now. How's that going? How's handling the traffic in the lab going?
Indeed. I mean, to that point, lately it feels like drinking from a fire hydrant, but things, the pendulum is definitely swinging in a better direction, as, hopefully Marc and his team can acknowledge. Our last month was definitely our worst month on record in our, since operational. But, we've had to weather, obviously, COVID threw a wrench in everybody's operations. Getting through the second amended vape quarantine order was another hiccup, but steadily working through it. So right now, I would say turnarounds on a full flower screen are averaging around 2 weeks. And we're hoping to whittle that down further, getting back to around a week by year end. So I know many of our partners have been used to the sub-week turnarounds, aiming to get back in the swing of that starting, heading into 2021. So definitely appreciate everybody's patience and understanding as we work through these challenges.
Sohan, what's the shortest turnaround that you've had so far since inception?
Since conception, that's a good question. So in theory, probably 3.5 days.
Now,
and pre-COVID, it was in that sub-week range, like 4 or 5 days.
Yep. So I understand COVID has just thrown a wrench into everything. How is the lab working with people in a remote situation? I mean, I know, I've talked to some of the people there. I know you've spread out, you got your social distancing going, but I also understand that you're hiring people too, because of how much work you guys have.
Indeed. So first and foremost, I mean, we're in the mission of promoting people's safety. So that, trickles down throughout the staff and our internal operations as well. So first and foremost is just keeping only essential personnel and limiting that. So we've had lab techs only for the most part, and then handling samples. We've had to redirect some of our flow, update SOPs. Certain activities can only be performed with limited personnel now, reduced shifts. So there's been a lot of, personnel shifting, updating of SOPs for everybody's safety.
Quick question. When you look for an employee, when you look for a lab technician, what's the background of the person you're looking for?
To start, I would say we're always looking for good people, but very detail oriented. In order to process the samples, we have to stay strictly in compliance and adhere to SOPs. So definitely they're all well trained in details and also critical thinking. So we have people coming from all various backgrounds, but primarily in the sciences, whether it's analytical chemistry, microbiologists.
I've been talking to so many chemistry professors and instructors at Oaksterdam University, Cleveland School of Cannabis, and it's amazing how big a growth industry this truly is. Marc, from your perspective, if you were looking for an ideal employee, what part of your operation are you looking for the right kind of employee?
So we're consistently hiring. Just this past, I'd say over the past 10 days, I've seen 6 or 7 new faces come through the door. But in terms of what we do, we have a very unique culture here. We're a family business, right? So we are unique in Massachusetts in that it's hard to keep track now with all of the new licensees, but certainly for a significant period of time, we were the only family-owned, family-operated, self-financed, vertically integrated company in Massachusetts. Cannabis company in Massachusetts. You had people that came operationally from out of state, and they linked up with local money. You had operations from here and money from out of state. You had groups that were on a never-ending fundraising quest, right? Some of your, and it still goes on, right? Some of your earlier guests just talked about, the accolade, the personal accolades that they need to add so that they can more effectively raise money. And some of these groups are, they're raising money to try to develop their operations, and some of them are raising money so that they can grow market share so that they themselves can be acquired. So we're unique in that. So in terms of who we look to bring in, even though we'll hire somebody for a specific role here, you'll never hear that's not my job. So, and that dates back to our family business, our family construction company. If I had to, grab a shovel, or my brother had to jump in a ditch, or my sister had to, go out into the woods, we just did what you had to do. It was unthinkable not to. So we look for people who want to be part of that. Everybody gets along. It's a family here. It's a family within. Something we created special here. The people here genuinely like each other. The ones that don't, or the ones that seek drama, don't typically last very long. There's no BS. It's just who we are. We don't have investors walking around kicking the tires. There's no question as to who anybody reports to or what our goal is.
Yeah.
So tell us a lot about what we've talked about this afternoon is beverages, and I know we haven't touched upon that so far in this segment, but Marc, is CommCan doing anything in the beverage area?
Well, funny you should ask. Yes, CommCan produces the only rec compliant beverage in Massachusetts. We produce the only soda. We produce a couple of different varieties, but we produce a canned carbonated soda. So, sub five milligrams to be rec compliant.
Yeah, I know those beverages are tough to get dialed in, and Marc and his team did quite a bit of diligence.
Sure. So tell us about what were some of the challenges of getting into the beverage market?
So let me start off first. Our drink line here is called SIP, SIP. You can go online to sip-bev.com. You can follow up at SIP Beverages on social. You can find all that stuff linked through all of our, regular channels as well, CommCan.com, on all the social platforms. So, like I said before, we were a vertically integrated company. We were forced to be. That's just the only option there was under the medical program. So we developed a lab, we developed a kitchen, we had our cultivation facility, we had our points of sale, we had our transport, all that kind of stuff. We decided, I decided that having a drink was important. And so my lab director at the time had come to me, started in pharma doing bio extractions, and then had started a organic soda company in Brooklyn. They'd run that for about 6 years. And it was one of the things that made him attracted to me to be part of our team. And so he developed our first drink. And yeah, exactly as Sohan said, and the previous guest said, it's a nightmare. It is a very difficult product to make, especially once you add carbonation. It's, oil, cannabis oil does not want to go gently into that good night. It does not want to be, forced into a water, I love that, a water compatible situation, not a water soluble situation. I'll defer to your previous guest on that. But what we decided to do was, we can talk about it, we can, try to raise money behind all that kind of stuff. What we really decided to do was proof of concept. So we developed quite possibly the world's smallest canning operation. And within a small section of our kitchen, we got a couple of 2-barrel tanks, and we got a very small, manual canning line. We bought a pasteurizer, and we went to work. And after significant trial and error, as Sohan knows, we produced a shelf-stable, wonderful, great tasting beverage, which was different than there were some medical beverages out at the time, and certainly there are across the country. And the most common thing that those drinks have in common is that they taste terrible.
Yeah, that's right.
That was a driving force. Somebody's going to have to want to consume this. They're going to want to enjoy it. That's what we ended up with.
So you've got five, if I heard you right, you have a 5 milligram soda, THC 5 milligram soda, correct?
I do.
Right. Do you sell them in 6-packs, 4-packs, individuals? How do you sell them, and what do they sell for?
So right now I sell you get into a lot of issues here. It's not as easy as, if you were selling beer or, a non-alcoholic beverage in terms of metric tracking and compliance and all that kind of stuff. So we bring them over to a dispensary individually, and then we can create through Metric, which is the software tracking system here in the Commonwealth and most of the states across the country.
Yeah.
We can create another product from that, which we have as a 4-pack. So you can set a different price point. You can't do sales on the adult use side, but you can set different price points for different groupings of products. So we sell an individual can, or we sell a 4-pack. Now, a 4-pack at this point is not packaged like a 6-pack of beer. It's 4 individual cans, but for price point considerations, it's a 4-pack.
Gotcha.
So and these are carbonated beverages, correct?
Right.
They are. Yeah. I got a little. I'll show you just what a can looks like. So that's that's the lemon soda. So right now we have a lemon soda. I don't know if you can see that. And then we follow that up with a carbonated half and half. So that's colloquially, we would call that an Arnold Palmer. Of course, I never would because I don't have a copyright name for that. So that is a half and half lemonade iced tea. And the thing we did with that, which kind of ties into your previous guess, is that since it was a half and half, we decided to make it a 1-for-1. So it's equal parts THC and CBD.
There you go. And how much CBD? Well, it's equal, 5-5. Okay.
Right.
I got that. I understood equal.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
And you don't have any issues with, obviously, for example, if you have infused water and it separates, you can shake it. Carbonated soda, it can't separate because you shake it. You can't open it.
Right. Well, you can, but it explodes.
So, yeah. And so technically, and what you guys were talking about earlier, we call it crashing out, right? So when you said you have a glob of the distillate, right? You take a sip and you have all of the THC, and then the rest of your drink has got none. We call it crashing out. Technically, as soon as a product crashes out, it's no longer compliant in Massachusetts, because you can't have, just like you can't have a gummy where one corner of it would contain all the THC. You can't have a cookie where you might get all of the dosage in one bite. So those things are harder to visibly see. But certainly, if you ever see a beverage on the market where the THC is crashed out, it's no longer compliant.
So I'm going to jump in really quick for a little bit of a promo for you, Marc. On our chat, we've got somebody who's asked where they can get the beverage. CommCan's located, the adult use store is on Route 109 in Millis. Easy to spot, beautiful building.
Yeah, I've been down 109 a million times.
Yep.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we have two locations currently. We have that original med only store on Route 9 West in Southborough, sort of between 85 and 495 by the old Volvo dealership, if anybody's from that area. Yeah. And then Route 109 in Millis is adult use and medical.
Right.
Located.
And what are the plans for CommCan? You've got one adult use store. You're looking for more stores, or?
Yeah. So the next location that will open up for us is Reposa. So we are under construction, well underway on a adult use only dispensary in Rehoboth. So Rehoboth down, right next to Seekonk and then East Providence and Providence. So that sort of corner of the state. And then we have a provisional for medical in Mansfield that has been tied up for a number of years for a couple of different reasons. But that's where we're at right now.
Yep.
I got a question for Sohan, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
Sohan, when I talked with two of your scientists, and one of the things that I asked them was if they could change one rule in Massachusetts, what that rule would be. And then they went on to explain that Massachusetts tests for the most pesticides of any state. Is there any way to move off that? Is there any frustration still with that? Or are we just have the safest testing facilities in the world here in Massachusetts?
It's a great question. I mean, Mass has some of the more stringent standards here in the country. It's still done on a state-to-state basis. And I mean, I'll defer to presumably Dan and Scott on the pesticide side of things. Right. I do know that the new draft regs I think they're adding in 9 new pesticides to the method. So our team's actively working on adding to and validating those. But there's varying schools of thought. As opposed to a static list, we could test for a rotating, so people can't really game, but not that there's really much of that going on. Some of the limits of detection and quantification could be, or the action limits at which things pop hot could be adjusted. For example, residual solvents, we have probably by a magnitude, butane, for example, it's only 12 ppb. And then in other states, it's on like a couple hundred. So just kind of using good sense, but also not girding the producers too tightly. We always kind of advocate for minimal testing that ensures maximal compliance, rather see the dollars go towards better products, ultimately towards the patients.
And Marc, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say with Sohan's butane analogy, the thing the analogy that always floats around is that a burger cooked on your propane grill would never pass testing in Massachusetts.
That's probably true. Hey, as you probably know, there's been this pandemic recently that's impacted everybody's world. How have you handled the pandemic? And I know there's been some dispensaries that have had some employees that have tested positive. What's been your experience with dealing with the COVID pandemic right now?
So one of the things that again, we talk about our culture and what makes us unique, and answering only to ourselves is our ability to make very quick decisions and fast pivots. So what we saw actually leading up to the shutdown, tremendous crowds, right? So, and this was already when masks weren't readily, worn, but social distancing had been enacted. And first thing we did is we have 13 points of sale. Let's just talk about Southborough is medical only. It's always sort of calm there. But Millis, Millis is adult use as well. So, we'll see, 700-800 people in a day over there. So yeah. So as we were leading up to, first thing we did is we have 13 points of sale there. We can get people in and out very quickly, the way that we're set up. An average transaction for an adult use customer in our dispensary is, 1.5 to maybe 3 minutes. If somebody wants to stay and talk and ask questions, that's fantastic, and we encourage it. But people want to get in, they know what they want, and they want to get out. We're very adept at doing that. First thing we did is we closed every other point of sale. So we would have space not only between the customers, but we would have space between our employees. Then we limited the number of people that were allowed in the store at a time. We made our queue different. We noticed outside, even though we have an overflow parking lot, people would get out of their cars, they would stand in line. At one point prior to the shutdown, nobody knew when the shutdown was coming. We were seeing 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 people a day instead. We had the line queuing through our parking lot and down the sidewalk down Route 109. Well, we had the news helicopters overhead and we had all that kind of stuff. And my job became standing in the parking lot trying to ensure 6 feet of space between everybody.
Right.
It was untenable. It didn't look good, and it wasn't necessarily, good for the populace. So Marc, my head of IT, who's somebody that we've known for a very long time. He's a 1970s MIT grad and a profound tinkerer. He determined that some old school technology would suit us, and he rolled out what we now call CommCan radio. He got a low distance FM transmitter akin to a drive-in movie theater, right? You can broadcast within 150 feet of your location without getting into any federal guidelines.
Yeah.
And we developed a system where you went into the overflow parking lot, you got a ticket, you turned your radio to an open channel, which for us is 90.1 FM. You listened for your ticket to be called, then you drove into the main lot. Once you got to the main lot, at that point, we were doing curbside only. So you'd come over and somebody would come out to you. We immediately switched over to all these handheld devices, so you were allowed to do a debit transaction in the parking lot, but not a cash transaction. That was verboten. So if you wanted a cash transaction, you had to go into the vestibule, the security vestibule.
Right.
So that's how we adapted, and we've kept many of those things. CommCan radio now is in effect every day throughout the day at busy times, pretty much all day on Fridays and Saturdays. We queue people up outside, but we never have more than 6 people lined up outside because we can control that. Right. Now with winter, colder weather here, we just installed heaters that come, like you're outside of a hotel, they come down on you from while you're standing in line.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of the things that we had to do, that we did that internally on the cultivation side, where we have, quite a few employees working in close proximity. We did different things. We started doing different shifts, right? We started different packaging shifts, AM, PM that don't overlap. We went through and made sure that everybody's workstation was the appropriate distance apart. We scan everybody's temperature before they come in. We assure people that don't come in if you're not feeling well. Your job is, your job's safe, all that kind of stuff. So we've really tried to, like I said, it's a family business. We treat people here like their family. So we don't want people to get sick. I mean, forget about the fact that obviously your business can't function if people are sick. We know everybody here now. We need to protect people, and they do a good job protecting themselves.
All right. Hey, one last question. If I wanted to order some of the SIP, can I go online, order it, and then pick it up curbside?
So right now we do, first of all, it would have to be in stock, which it often is not.
Okay.
But that's changing. I can tell you that we are in the process of building out a new area within our facility. The production goes up 8 to 10-fold with an automated canning line and much bigger tanks and all that kind of stuff. We're rolling out new products that are in development. But if you are a medical card holder, then yes, if it's in stock, you 100%. You go to our website, you fill your basket. So your viewers know you don't complete the transaction online. That would be illegal. But you can sort of pre-order and have your products ready and waiting for you. Then absolutely, you can go to one of the locations and have that delivered curbside to you.
There you go. Well, that may be on my to-do list before Thanksgiving, but Marc Rosenfeld.
Well, tell Sohan to move the product results through, and maybe you'll have it again.
I actually called Sohan's boss last week and asked him to do that. So the best I could.
First sip.
That's right. Hey, Sohan, great to see you again, and Marc, great to meet you. I've heard
Likewise.
Great things about your operation, and now I can totally understand why. I'm all for that. So thank you. Both of you guys have a great holiday week ahead.
Thank you both. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
All
Great
right.
to see
Yes,
everybody.
indeed. Happy Thanksgiving. So, David, Happy holiday to you and yours.
Likewise, Jimmy.
And I appreciate that. And for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, we're actually going to have one more live show on Monday, our Medicinal Monday show. And then we are taking a break for Thanksgiving. So we hope wherever you are, that you are safe. You're surrounded by a few loved ones, not a lot of loved ones, but a few. Those core nuclear family people are okay. We wish you all the best. So for everybody here, Dan, Isabel, the entire PCM team, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Have a great weekend. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton with Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to talk about the week's biggest stories in the cannabis industry from here in Massachusetts to the West Coast to around the world. And this week, we start here in the Bay State where COVID has hit a local dispensary. You know which one too, don't you, Kurt?
I believe it's Netta in Brookline. And once again, we may be seeing curbside pickup, just like the first COVID strike. But obviously, a lot of sick employees down there. It's not going to be limited to just cannabis businesses, obviously, as this wave comes in. But it's certainly something that, as a retail store, you have to have those contingency plans.
It was 2 office workers who tested positive, but of course, they came in contact with 28 other employees. So 30 people at Netta are now in quarantine. And Kurt, this is the second time Netta has had an issue with positive COVID cases, and the Department of Public Health actually has records of 10 more cases in different dispensaries around the state. So the pandemic is everywhere, and it's not going away soon.
Well, hopefully they cut their teeth on the curbside delivery the first time around, right? We got Governor Baker to move on that, and they've already run through the process. And if they had to flip it back on, let's hope it's kind of like a transition that's pretty quick.
And somehow or other, people are still buying weed in the state of Massachusetts because they passed the $1 billion mark in the state. That's a lot of weed to be sold since the beginning in November of 2018.
It's a lot of tax revenue, more importantly, and that's what we're looking at the federal level. And remember, Governor Baker is not a fan of cannabis. This was a slow rollout, drag your feet, kicking and pulling, and a lot of towns opted out. So 1 billion sounds like a big number. But really, it could be closer to like what Illinois did, $1 billion in their first X amount of months if we had opened the gates and really made it a vibrant program.
Right. In the meantime, let's check out the earnings of the big MSOs with Deb Borchardt of the Green Market Report. Deb?
Thanks, guys. Well, once again, it was another big week for earnings from some of the industry's biggest players. Curaleaf reported total revenue of $182 million. That was a 195% increase over last year. Still, they reported a net loss of $9.3 million. They also announced that the current president, Joseph Bayern, has been appointed as the company's next CEO. The current CEO, Joseph Lusardi, is going to be named the executive vice chairman of the board. Cresco Labs released unaudited financial results for the third quarter with revenue hitting $153.3 million. Now, this was a 63% sequential increase over the second quarter revenue of $93 million and an even bigger jump over last year's revenue of $36 million for the same time period. They also delivered net income of $4.9 million for the quarter. And Florida-based Trulieve reported revenue of $136 million for the third quarter. This was a 13% sequential increase over the second quarter, and they beat analyst estimates. Trulieve also delivered positive net income of $17.4 million. And that's the big news this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
One state that every MSO is eyeing already is New Jersey. Now that the voters have spoken on legalization, legislators in the Garden State are getting involved in the plans for regulation. Now, after a snag earlier this week, they have agreed that carrying 6 ounces of weed in that state will be legal. Now, you can't sell it yet, but at least there is some peace of mind. Kurt, 6 ounces is a lot of weed, especially when it's medical grade potency, right?
The best part is that the people making the rules have no idea what flour is and how much it weighs. Massachusetts did the same thing. I think when they first opened, it was something like you have like 10 ounces every 90 days because someone who wrote it has no idea what they're doing. Like that sounds 10 ounces. I guess that's about right. If you look at the numbers, you couldn't encourage a black market or selling to your friends anymore by letting them buy that much weed. But, as New Jersey pushes forward with this, it's certainly making New York move quickly because they don't want to lose that tax revenue. And you know what's right next to New York? DC, right, Jimmy? So let's go to Vote Pro Pot Podcast and Phil Adams, who had me on as a guest this week. Thank you.
Hi, this is Phil Adams with Vote Pro Podcast, here with the Weed Talk News DC Report. The most popular candidate in the 2020 elections appears to have been cannabis. In the 5 states where adult use and/or medical cannabis legalization was on the ballot, Arizona, Mississippi, Montana, New Jersey, and South Dakota, more Americans voted for cannabis legalization than for either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Cannabis also beat out many of the down-ballot candidates of both parties by sizable margins. Former President Barack Obama appears to have been no fan of cannabis legalization during his time in office. In his recently published memoir, A Promised Land, Obama describes how he used negotiations with GOP lawmakers to deflect calls for legalization and other, quote, less orthodox ideas. In spite of being the first president to openly acknowledge cannabis use in his youth, Obama had presided over more raids on state legal dispensaries during his first term than his predecessor George W. Bush had in 8 years. Regarding descheduling, Obama's policy was to defer to legislation by the legislative branch. In a 2014 interview with CNN, Obama said, quote, "What is and isn't a Schedule I narcotic is a job for Congress." A prominent Senate Republican is calling on his colleagues to take up the Safe Banking Act. Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania told American Banker he'd be open to working with Democrats to pass the Secure and Safe Enforcement Banking Act, even if the Senate remains in GOP control. Toomey said he is, quote, sympathetic to the idea that people who are involved in the cannabis industry in an entirely legal fashion ought to be able to have ordinary banking services. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
Now, there might be another state looking to get into the legal weed world. It's Virginia. The governor, Ralph Northam, announced he would introduce legislation to legalize adult use of cannabis in his state. Now, I know the Vote Pro Pot guys probably are very happy to hear about that. Kurt, did you enjoy your appearance on that show?
It was one of the best, if not the best highlight of my online career. Obviously not with this show, which is the highlight of my online career. But yes, they are a great show. Look it up. They're big on Spotify and some of the other podcasting. It is Vote Pro Pot Podcast. Check that out. And they do a great report. And they're in DC. They're the ones who are telling you what they're hearing, what they're seeing in the bills, the legislatures. So definitely a must listen to. Check them out.
Indeed. So while other states are checking out what it will take to legalize cannabis for tax revenue, of course, Forbes reports that Vank's CEO Carson Humiston forecasts that the 5 states who recently voted for legalization at the ballot box will add 26,000 jobs in this cannabis space. Now, Kurt, you've heard me rail about how cannabis as a plant should be synonymous with job growth. It's part of this perfect storm for weed that's happening right now.
Yeah, I think Karsten's taking the under on that. She's betting Vegas low because that should be really, even in Arizona, if you just think of just the kind of the metropolitan areas, you could see where you could chew up a good amount of those jobs as well as the cultivations in a hot climate. So I'm going higher. I'm going to go $1 over. So there you go.
You're going for the over. All right. Also announced last week was the formation of an association of cannabis regulators from 19 states, the Cannabis Regulators Association, or CANRA. Norman Birnbaum will head up that association. He's from New York. He, of course, has a medical program, but hasn't got into the adult use world. But we do know that New York is trying to do that. This will serve as a sounding board or an open forum for regulators from different states to share ideas and best practices for rolling out these new markets. So, Kurt, this is kind of a good sign for a growing industry, isn't it?
It is, and it's really a response to the federal prohibition ban. You're starting to see these quasi-state level governmental groups trying to figure out a way to do state trade, going back to the 1742 Magna Carta New York thing. So again, it's certainly progress when you have all sorts of states getting together to kind of form a committee. But once federal, if the MORE Act passed and you pull that substance off the Controlled Substance Act, none of this stuff's going to matter. You don't need any regulators, don't need any of this. It's going to be removed from the ban list as far as interstate trade.
So speaking of growing, and that's what's going on in a new state of Maine. Took them a few years to get it going, but it is in fact going very, very well at the vacation land location. And who better to keep us up with that growth than our main man himself, Rye Russell from Weed Buds Radio. Rye?
Your main man here, Rye Russell from Weed Buds Radio, with your Maine Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. As Maine's adult use program continues to roll out slower than anticipated, Maine's largest cannabis retailer, Wellness Connection, is stepping into the adult use market on Monday under a new brand, High North Maine. Leadership from Wellness Connection, Suzanne Pingree and Charlie Langston, said in an exclusive interview on Weed Buds Radio that High North is a tribute to all of the natural beauty we have here in the Pine Tree State. Their South Portland location will be their first to convert to this new brand and will no longer be able to serve medical patients. However, their Portland location will continue to serve Maine's medical marijuana community. As the adult use market here in Maine continues to serve that local community, the industry is already preparing for the potential increase in tourism. Many retailers are already seeing the impact of slow cultivation approvals, driving up the prices of wholesale cannabis. And these retailers are hopeful that more cultivation facilities will enter the market, lowering prices and allowing them to serve patrons without fears for running out of product. That will do it for this week's Maine Cannabis Report. I'm Rye Russell from Weed Buds Radio, reporting for Weed Talk News.
Another country that is moving towards legalization is the country that is just south of the United States. That would be Mexico, for those of you who might be geographically challenged. Now, rather quickly, that Senate has passed it over the weekend, and that's good news, especially if you want legalization in the United States. Right, Kurt?
Yeah, absolutely. Because of the cost of labor, electricity, transportation, they may have a familiarity of how to move things across borders that are prohibited in one country. That's just going to drive prices down in margins. And if you're in the U.S., you're going to let that market take, 20% of what could be taxed at the federal or state level. I hope not.
And it also means that the United States is squeezed between two legal countries, Canada to the north, Mexico to the south. Now, as we turn to another country that's moving towards legalization, that country is Israel. And of course, they're in the Middle East, which is a far way away from the United States. But the Promised Land has always been at the forefront of science and research, and they have a very active medical program. But now their Minister of Justice, Avi Nissenkorn, sees legalization as inevitable over the next 9 months. I say muzzle tov to that, Kurt.
Someone's got to tell Ari that it's raining weed. Those drones are keep dropping weed all over Israel. You got to catch it and tax it. Make a penny off that.
That's the idea anyway. That is the idea. Now, one more little note about cannabis legalization, and it comes from Madison, Wisconsin, which is the capital of Wisconsin. It's also where the University of Wisconsin is. And now the city council there is allowing public consumption of cannabis for 18-year-olds plus. Obviously, they made a bit of an exception knowing that there, is a university in town. That's a pretty good move. And now you can now smoke your cannabis in public. Now, there's a little caveat here, Kurt, and it has to do with students on campus. You still can't walk around with your bong or any other type of paraphernalia because you'll get a ticket. And you know how big that ticket is, Kurt?
How big, Jimmy?
I knew you'd ask me. It's all of $1. And that's a big amount for a student at college, isn't it?
All I know, the guy who's offering the 5-cent chicken wings on Thursday night in downtown Madison, he's going to need a bigger boat.
So I got to ask you a question. Since we are going to take the week off for the Thanksgiving holiday, we will not be canceling it, but we will be postponing our news for 2 weeks. So I have to ask Mr. Kurt Dalton, is an infused turkey dinner on the menu at the Dalton household for Thanksgiving next week?
It's funny you should ask, but there may be something coming out on cannabis.net about a private Thanksgiving stuffing recipe, cannabis infused style. So stay tuned.
And I'll be perfectly honest with you, that's always been the secret ingredient in my stuffing.
That's why everybody falls asleep.
That's right, but that just happens anyway, doesn't it? Isn't that what Thanksgiving's all about? Anyway, a happy Thanksgiving to you, Kurt, and to your family as well.
Yeah, to everybody out there, enjoy the holiday. Hopefully you're getting a break from whatever it is we're doing. And even with the COVID stress, hopefully you can enjoy a nice meal and some football and maybe some cannabis.
That's right. That's what it's about. And that'll do it for Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton with cannabis.net.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly and have a safe, quiet Thanksgiving.
We Talk Now, We Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.